Chapter 1505. Everyone was kneeling down devoutly. Only Ji Tianxing did not kneel and even dared to look straight at the Divine Master statue. This was absolutely a great disrespect. This was the first time the Great Protector had encountered such a thing in the hundreds of years he had been overseeing the vast heaven pagoda. He did not recite the holy text. His sharp gaze stared at Ji Tianxing and anger was written all over his face. A formless pressure was released from his body and suppressed towards Ji Tianxing. In order not to affect the worship ceremony, he chose to use this method to remind Ji Tianxing. He believed that even if the white-robed youth was momentarily absent-minded, he would definitely kneel down respectfully after being reminded. Zhoush. The formless pressure enveloped Ji Tianxing, causing his body to tremble twice. His face also became ghastly pale. However, he did not have any reaction. He still stood tall and straight with his eyes looking straight at the Divine Master statue. His expression was still changing. Seeing this scene, the Great Protector was instantly enraged. He thought to himself, "Damn brat, you actually ignored my reminder and still dare to be so rude." The worship ceremony could not proceed for the time being. The Great Protector stared coldly at Ji Tianxing and scolded in a deep voice. "You junior, how dare you? You actually dare to offend the Divine Master's dignity and disrupt the worship ceremony. You really don't know what's good for you. Why aren't you kneeling down and admitting your guilt?" The Great Protector's angry roar suddenly sounded like thunder exploding in the main hall. The hundreds of young geniuses and the 6 divine envoys were all shocked. Everyone turned their heads and looked around the main hall. Finally, their gazes fell on Ji Tianxing. Seeing him standing stiffly on the spot with his eyes looking straight at the Divine Master statue, everyone's expression changed drastically. They revealed complicated expressions. Most of the young geniuses were shocked and puzzled by this. They secretly sized up Ji Tianxing and discussed in whispers. Who is this guy? He actually dares to behave atrociously in the temple. Is he tired of living? This is the most sacred worship ceremony. Everyone is kneeling down to worship. He actually dares to stand? Looks like he's from the Chuyan Empire. What a disgrace. Is that brat crazy? How dare he lose his composure in front of the Divine Master's statue? Isn't that courting death? The head protector is furious. This brat is finished. He will definitely be punished severely and even expelled from the vast heaven pagoda. The geniuses of the various countries all looked on coldly as if they were watching a good show. The young geniuses of the Chuyan Empire were even more shocked, and their expressions became even more complicated. Ji Tianxing has always been arrogant and condescending. I didn't expect him to behave so atrociously in the shrine. That damned bastard. Don't drag us into this mess. When Quan Long and Lan Yiqing came back to their senses, a cold light flashed in their eyes as they sneered inwardly. I really underestimated this guy. I didn't expect him to be so arrogant that he even dares to offend the Divine Master. Originally, I was still cultivating diligently, vowing to surpass him and personally kill him for revenge. Who would have thought that he would offend the Divine Master's dignity in front of so many people? This was a heinous crime. The head protector will definitely punish him severely. It would be best if he is expelled from the vast heaven pagoda. Then, the honor of being the #1 genius of the Chuyan Empire will return to my hands. Yin Wuke was standing behind Ji Tianxing. When he saw this scene, his heart was burning with anxiety and his eyes were filled with worry. He hurriedly transmitted his voice to Ji Tianxing and shouted, "Young Master Ji, what are you standing there for? Quickly kneel down and pay your respects." "You despicable brat, we are in the shrine now. Don't be stupid." Yin Wuke shouted anxiously. He was so anxious that his face had turned red. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing did not respond. He also ignored Yin Wuke's voice and his body was still stiff as he stood there. Lin Daoist also frowned and a look of worry and anger flashed in his eyes. When he saw that Ji Tianxing had become the center of attention and was being criticized and mocked, he hurriedly shouted coldly, "Ji Tianxing, you are in the shrine. Do not be rude." However, Ji Tianxing still did not respond. He did not make a sound and he did not move. He was like a wooden puppet. No one knew that just now an invisible layer of shackles in the depths of his soul had been broken. Some memories and images sealed in the depths of his soul surged out like a tide, drowning his primordial spirit. His consciousness was swallowed by a black whirlpool, and a vast image appeared in the depths of his soul. In the sky above a vast sea of clouds, two figures stood proudly. The figure on the left was a valiant man wearing golden armor and a wide cape. This person was tall and muscular and his face was dignified. He exuded a domineering aura that looked down on all living things. When he saw this person's face clearly, Ji Tianxing was shocked. This person looked exactly the same as the statue of Divine Master Taihao in the shrine. Obviously, this man in golden armor was martial god Taihao. In the white sea of clouds beneath his feet, half of a dark golden pagoda was revealed. It shone with a sacred golden light. Ji Tianxing immediately recognized that it was the clear sky pagoda. He looked at the second figure in the image. It was a tall young man in white robes. His face was resolute and cold. His eyebrows were sharp and his eyes were bright. His eyes contained a domineering aura that looked down on the world. His attire was rather simple. He only wore a snow-white robe and a pair of black cloth shoes. He had a silver belt around his waist, and his long hair was tied up with a green hairband. When Ji Tianxing saw his face clearly, a trace of fear flashed in the depths of his soul. This white-robed young man's appearance was exactly the same as his, without the slightest difference. However, this white-robed young man was not him but Kenshin. At this moment, martial god Taihao bowed to Kenshin and said solemnly, "I've long heard of Kenshin's name. It's my honor to invite Kenshin to Mount God Bestowment." Kenshin looked at martial god Taihao calmly and nodded slightly. He asked, "Why are you looking for me?" Martial god Taihao did not answer. Instead he asked, "I heard that Kenshin once sparred with Luo Shui and defeated her in 3 moves. He also enlightened Luo Shui and made her divine power reach the perfection stage?" "That's true," Kenshin nodded calmly. Martial god Taihao's eyes flickered. He said with anticipation, "I've always admired Kenshin and I've long wanted to get to know you. Besides, I believe that my sword principle has reached the perfection stage. No one in the world can defeat me. If I can't spar with you, it'll be my greatest regret." Kenshin had expected this. He nodded calmly and said, "Please make your move." Martial god Taihao's palm flashed with golden light. A divine sword with a golden sheath appeared and he assumed a stance. "Kenshin, draw your sword." Kenshin shook his head and said calmly, "The sword is in the heart between the heavens and earth outside of the rift. It's not in the hand." Chapter 1506. Martial god Taihao's eyes flickered and he hurriedly bowed to Kenshin. He said with admiration, "So that's how it is. Thank you, Kenshin, for enlightening me." Taihao admitted defeat and he accepted his defeat wholeheartedly. As the ancients say, if one learns of the Tao in the morning, one can die without regrets. Today, after hearing Kenshin's words, Taihao finally understood the mysteries of the way of the sword. It was boundless and limitless. It's laughable that I used to brag that I was number 1 in the way of the sword, and that I was invincible in the Shenwu continent. I was really too blind. Martial god Taihao seemed to have gained enlightenment, and he instantly broke through the shackles of the martial way, discovering an even wider realm of the martial way. He was rather moved and he was also very respectful towards Kenshin. He accepted him wholeheartedly. After a while the image gradually faded and it was about to dissipate. At that moment, a thunderous sound suddenly rang out in Ji Tianxing's soul, jolting him back to his senses. "How dare you? Kneel down and admit your sins." Following this explosive shout, before Ji Tianxing could figure out what was going on, he felt a sharp pain in his body, and his origin spirit began to tremble violently. Boom! Everyone in the shrine had personally witnessed Ji Tianxing being struck by the head protector's palm, and he spat out a mouthful of blood as he flew back dozens of meters. After that, he landed on the ground of the shrine with a bang, and he rolled a few times before coming to a stop. The shrine was silent, and the young geniuses from various countries revealed complicated expressions. Some were in awe of the head protector's might, while others felt pity for Ji Tianxing's fate. There were also a few who rejoiced in his misfortune. As for Kuang Long and Lan Yiqing, the sneers in their eyes became even thicker, and they felt even more pleased and carefree. Only Yin Wuk ignored everyone's strange gazes and hurriedly crawled up from the ground to support Ji Tianxing. However, just as he rushed to Ji Tianxing's side, he was shouted back by the head protector. "Back off. Go back and kneel properly." Otherwise you will be punished as well. The head protector's angry shout caused Wuxia's body to tremble, and his footsteps became stiff. The pressure of a martial saint enveloped his entire body, and he did not dare to move recklessly. He had no doubt that the Great Guardian only needed a single thought to crush him into pieces. Lin Daoist also hurriedly transmitted a message to him, telling him to retreat quickly and not make any mistakes. Wuxia's expression was extremely ugly. His gaze changed. After hesitating and struggling for a moment, he retreated step by step. Enduring great torment and humiliation, he returned to his original position and silently knelt down. At the same time, Xianxia, who was lying on the ground vomiting blood, slowly stood up. The Great Guardian's palm strike had not only shattered the image in the depths of his soul and awakened him, but it had also severely injured him. A sharp pain came from his internal organs as if thousands of needles were stabbing him. He slowly lifted his sleeve to wipe off the blood at the corner of his mouth. His face was expressionless as he coldly swept his gaze across the hall and looked at the Great Guardian. Only now did he understand what had just happened. When everyone was kowtowing, he became absent-minded and stood out from the crowd, which infuriated the Great Guardian. However, he did not intend to explain himself. When the Great Guardian saw that Wuxia had regained consciousness, his anger dissipated slightly. He shouted with a dignified expression, "Men! Take down this bastard who offended the Divine Master's dignity and disturbed the worship ceremony." As soon as his voice fell, 2 guards in golden armor immediately rushed in from outside the door. Swish swish. 2 golden armored protectors flew to Xianxia's side, one on the left and one on the right, and used their magic power to suppress him. Lin Daoist frowned and hurriedly cupped his hands towards the Great Guardian. He pleaded, "Great Guardian, please wait. This disciple's surname is Ji and his name is Xianxia. I have mentioned him to you before. This person has just arrived and does not know the rules of the temple. Perhaps he was intimidated by the Divine Master's dignity, which is why he lost his composure in front of everyone. Great Guardian, please give him a way out." Lin Daoist was obviously hinting to the Great Guardian that this person was the #1 genius of the Chuyan Empire and had unlimited potential. However, the Great Guardian glanced at him coldly and shouted in a deep voice, "The vast heaven pagoda is the place where Lord Divine Master imparts the Tao. It is the martial holy land of the 6 nations. How sacred is it? No matter who comes here, everyone is treated equally and must abide by the Divine Kingdom's laws and the vast heaven pagoda's rules. This child offended the Divine Master's dignity in front of everyone and disturbed the worship ceremony. This is an unforgivable crime. Divine Envoy Lin, how do you want this seat to show mercy? Could it be that this seat is going to sit by and watch him offend the Divine Master?" Lin Daoist was instantly speechless. The Great Guardian spoke righteously. Even if he wanted to plead for Xianxia, he was powerless. Helpless, he could only bow and retreat. The Great Guardian's dignified gaze swept across everyone and said in a deep voice, "According to the Divine Kingdom's laws, Xianxia despised the Divine Master and disturbed the worship ceremony. He should be punished with 70 lashes. Immediately escort him to the plaza outside the temple and tie him to a stone pillar. This seat will personally execute him." The 2 golden armored guards acknowledged the order and escorted Xianxia out of the temple and toward the plaza. Only then did everyone understand that the mysterious black stone pillars in the corner of the plaza were actually used for execution. In a short while, the 2 guards escorted Xianxia to the black stone pillar and used a black iron chain with an array to tie him to the stone pillar. The Great Guardian also walked to the stone pillar and reached out to take a dark red long whip from the guards. This long whip was 30 feet long and as thick as a child's arm. It was dark red in color and was surrounded by fierce red flames. This whip was not an ordinary item. It was a top primordial soul realm magic treasure that was refined with external astral fire. If it was whipped on a person's body, not only would the flesh and blood rupture, but the person would also be burned to ashes. Even the primordial soul would be severely injured and suffer extreme pain. If an ordinary primordial soul realm powerhouse was whipped 70 times by the heavenly fire whip, he would definitely be severely injured and would need to recuperate for a few years to recover. Xianxia was tied to the black stone pillar and could not resist at all. He could only silently endure the punishment. Many young geniuses in the temple, as well as the 6 divine messengers, were secretly paying attention to what was happening in the plaza. Everyone's expression was rather complicated as they secretly communicated with each other through voice transmission. No one had expected such a thing to happen in this year's selection of God's disciples. There were some who sympathized with Ji Tianxing, some who despised him, and some who gloated over his misfortune. In a short while, the great guardian held a book of God's nation code in his hands and read out Ji Tianxing's crimes and the corresponding punishment with a dignified expression. Then he held the heavenly fire whip in his hands and prepared to execute the punishment. Zhoush. He activated a vast amount of Dharma power and infused it into the heavenly fire whip. The long whip immediately became as straight as a sword and burst out billowing waves of fire. The great guardian waved his right hand and held the heavenly fire whip in his hand as he whipped Ji Tianxing fiercely. Smack! A crisp sound of an explosion was heard. The long whip with flames rising from it viciously lashed Ji Tianxing's chest. Suddenly, his white robe was torn open, and a dark red bloodstain appeared on his white jade-like skin. At the chopstick long wound, the flesh and blood were curling outwards. The surface of the skin and flesh had been charred and was emitting wisps of black smoke. Fortunately, his body had been tempered and his defense was extremely strong. Chapter 1507. Seeing this, the great guardian was stunned for a moment and frowned in confusion. He knew very well that the power of the heavenly fire whip could not be so weak. He was puzzled and was about to increase the strength of the whip to execute the punishment again. However, at this moment, a strong wind suddenly blew in the square. Whoosh! A strong wind came from nowhere and swept across the entire peak of Mount Godseal. The colorful spiritual fog that covered the sky was suddenly blown away by the strong wind. The calm and clear sky was also filled with wind and clouds. Endless black clouds surged in from all directions, gathering in the sky above the temple and the square, causing the world to darken. Purple lightning arcs flashed wildly in the dark clouds and gathered together quickly. Seeing the change in the sky, the great guardian was stunned. His eyes were filled with shock and confusion. The 6 divine messengers and hundreds of young geniuses in the temple also looked at the square with confusion. They did not understand what was happening. The great guardian frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly he was enlightened. He pointed at the sky and scolded Ji Tianxing sternly, "Rebellious disciple, do you see this? You have offended the dignity of the divine master and angered the heavens. This is the wrath of the heavens. I will punish you severely to appease the anger of the heavens and protect the dignity of the divine master." As he spoke, he raised the heavenly fire whip again and injected a vast amount of spiritual power into the long whip. The flames of the heavenly fire whip grew and its power doubled. Zhoosh! The great guardian raised the heavenly fire whip and lashed it at Ji Tianxing fiercely. The powerful heavenly fire whip was about to hit Ji Tianxing's chest. At this moment, a dazzling bolt of lightning suddenly lit up in the dark clouds that covered the sky and struck down toward the square. Kaboom! A deafening sound exploded in the sky and spread across the entire Mount Godseal. A lightning pillar that was thousands of feet tall tore the dark sky apart like a divine dragon and struck the black stone pillar at the corner of the square. Ji Tianxing, the chief enforcer, and the black stone pillar were instantly engulfed by the endless lightning. The stone pillar, which was more than 100 feet tall, was smashed into pieces on the spot. Gravel flew everywhere. An incomparably violent shockwave swept through the entire plaza, along with gravel and lightning arcs. The ferocious heavenly fire whip was actually split into several pieces by the divine lightning and fell into the rubble. The great guardian was also sent flying by the divine thunder and smashed into the square 1,000 feet away. His entire body was charred black, his clothes were ragged, and his long hair was disheveled and curled up with black smoke. Previously he still had a dignified aura, but now his head and face were covered in dust, and he was in an extremely sorry state. However, he had the strength of a martial sage and he was not seriously injured when he was suddenly struck by the sacred lightning. He only ended up in a pathetic state. After a while, the dust and black smoke that filled the sky gradually dispersed. The great guardian crawled up from the ground and saw the situation in the corner of the square. Ji Tianxing, who was wearing a white robe, was actually standing on top of the ruins, completely unharmed. Other than that bloody scar on his chest from being lashed out by the heavenly fire whip, there were no other injuries on his entire body. Seeing this scene, the great guardian was dumbfounded on the spot and cried out in disbelief. Wasn't he struck by the sacred lightning? How can he be safe and sound? No, there must be some problem, absolutely impossible. A dignified martial sage, the chief enforcer who guarded the vast heaven pagoda, was shocked until he could not be any more shocked, and his state of mind was already in chaos. However, the great changes in heaven and earth were not over yet. Right at this time, an even more shocking scene appeared. God's ceiling mountain, which was several thousand feet tall and resembled a giant pillar holding up the sky, actually shook violently. The entire giant mountain trembled, giving off a loud rumbling sound as if it was going to collapse. Many palaces and houses also cracked open with cracks, scattering countless gold bricks and glazed tiles. In the plaza outside the temple, the ground also cracked open with a huge ravine, bursting out dust that filled the sky. The scene of the earth shaking was as if doomsday had arrived. Black clouds pressed down in the sky as lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The earth shook violently, splitting open countless ravines. Even the sacred vast heaven pagoda, which pierced into the clouds, also shook violently, bursting with golden light. Things had developed to such a stage that the worship ceremony had already been completely destroyed. The 6 divine messengers and hundreds of young geniuses all rushed out of the temple in a hurry and rushed to the plaza outside the temple. They saw that the plaza had long been distorted and broken, and the ground was covered with wide ravines and gravel. The chief enforcer was covered in dust, and his hair was disheveled as he stood in the plaza. Ji Tianxing, who was dressed in a white robe, stood in the corner of the plaza, safe and sound, his expression cold. The divine messengers and young geniuses were dumbfounded when they saw this scene, completely unable to understand what was going on. The sudden change filled everyone with fear, and they were at a loss for what to do. No one would have thought that such a shocking astronomical change would occur in the martial arts sanctuary that had always been peaceful and auspicious. This was simply illogical. After everyone regained their senses, they all started to discuss doubtfully. Oh my God! How could this be? What exactly happened just now? Why did heaven and earth change so much, and why did the sacred lightning strike? What's wrong with the chief enforcer? Could it be that he was struck by the sacred lightning? Ji Tianxing was actually not injured? This is impossible. He offended the Divine Master's majesty and angered the Divine Master. He should be struck to death by the sacred lightning. For some time the plaza was noisy and very chaotic. Fortunately, God's ceiling mountain gradually calmed down and stopped shaking. The violent hurricane that filled heaven and earth, the black clouds that covered the sky, and the lightning in the clouds also gradually dissipated. The chief enforcer saw that everyone was in a mess and hurriedly tidied up his appearance, recovering his dignified posture. He pointed at Ji Tianxing with a face full of anger and said in an icy and dignified tone, "I believe that everyone saw it. It was precisely because Ji Tianxing offended the Divine Master's majesty that he angered the Divine Master. This madman committed treason, causing heaven and earth to change dramatically. The sacred mountain shook and sacred lightning fell from the sky. This is the Divine Master's fury and punishment. The vast heaven pagoda already can't tolerate him." Hearing the chief enforcer's explanation, everyone came to a realization and nodded repeatedly to express their agreement. Especially Lan Yiqing, Kuang Long and the rest, their faces were full of cold smiles, their eyes surging with a biting cold light. A green-robed divine envoy hurriedly chimed in and shouted with righteous indignation, "For 1,000 years, there has never been an accident here. God's ceiling mountain is a martial arts sanctuary that has always been peaceful. But today, Ji Tianxing offended the Divine Master's majesty and disrupted the worship ceremony. He actually caused a monstrous disaster. This envoy suggests that he must be severely punished to appease the Divine Master's anger." Chapter 1508. The great change in heaven and earth just now made everyone both shocked and furious. The divine envoys all agreed with the head protector's decision. Lin Daoist also did not dare to plead for Ji Tianxing when he saw that things had developed to such a stage. Everyone understood that sealed God Mountain suffered such a drastic change and suffered heavy losses. Ji Tianxing must be severely punished to settle this matter. The head protector took out the divine kingdom's law and read out the law with a dignified voice, condemning Ji Tianxing in front of everyone. Ji Tianxing committed treason and blasphemed the divine master's dignity. He is not fit to be a divine disciple. According to the divine kingdom's law, Ji Tianxing's status as a divine disciple candidate will be immediately abolished and demoted to a divine servant. He will be punished to be sent to the Spirit Beast Valley as a slave. Within 3 years, Ji Tianxing will raise spirit beasts in the Spirit Beast Valley as a sinner and cannot leave his post without permission. After 3 years we will observe the consequences. Hearing the head protector announce the punishment result, everyone revealed strange expressions. However, the vast majority of people agreed with the head protector's decision. There were even people who felt that the head protector's punishment for Ji Tianxing was already merciful enough. Ji Tianxing stared at the head protector coldly and said in an indifferent tone, "You are a martial saint powerhouse, the head protector guarding the vast heaven pagoda, but you are so muddle-headed and ignorant. I only made an unintentional mistake. But as the person in charge of the vast heaven pagoda, you do not have the heart of a benevolent person. You can't tolerate people's mistakes at all and easily inflict severe torture. When you were torturing me, the heavens were furious and sent down heavenly punishment, destroying the punishment whip and stone pillar. You also did not distinguish right from wrong and used your own conjecture to mislead the public and presume to convict me. You are arbitrary and not fit to guard the Dao field for martial god Tai Hao. You are even more unfit to be the head protector and be in charge of the vast heaven pagoda. Now that things have come to this, not only do you not reflect on your own mistakes, you still want to act willfully and expel me from the vast heaven pagoda. Are you not afraid that heavenly punishment will descend again and turn the entire vast heaven pagoda into ashes?" The cold and sonorous voice spread throughout the entire plaza, shaking everyone's heart and soul. His tone and expression were filled with an unparalleled domineering aura. His entire body erupted with invisible divine might that fiercely suppressed everyone. At that moment, everyone's primordial spirits were in a daze, and they had an illusion. It was as if the person standing in front of everyone was not a young genius, but a god who looked down on the world and controlled the universe. That formless divine might that looked down on the heavens and earth actually caused the great protector's body to stiffen. His eyes were filled with shock for a long time. After a while, he calmed down and exclaimed in his heart, "This brat only has the strength of an essence spirit realm cultivator. How could he release divine might to intimidate my essence spirit and make me feel fearful?" The 6 divine messengers and the geniuses also came to their senses. No one had expected that after the divine punishment incident, Ji Tianxing's first words would not be to plead for mercy, but to reprimand the great guardian. He actually used an incomparably unyielding attitude and peerlessly domineering aura to belittle the great protector to the point that he was worthless. It felt as if the heavenly punishment was under his control, and it was specifically used to punish the great guardian. Everyone's expression changed drastically, and they began to discuss secretly through voice transmission. "Oh my God! Is this brat crazy? How dare he reprimand the great protector so arrogantly? Is he trying to push all the blame away? Too arrogant. This brat's arrogance is simply appalling and unprecedented. This has never happened in hundreds of years, and this brat is suddenly famous. This incident will soon spread to all the countries, right? No matter how arrogant he is, it's useless. He will not have a good ending if he goes against the great protector." The great protector also frowned and stared at Ji Tianxing fiercely. He shouted angrily, "Ji Tianxing, you are so arrogant that you have lost your mind. Men, take down this crazy man who is spouting nonsense and immediately send him to the Spirit Beast Valley for punishment." The great protector did not want to waste any more time with him, and he immediately waved his hand to give the order. In fact, he was also a little worried that if he continued to tangle with Ji Tianxing, it would bring about another great change in heaven and earth and the divine punishment. 4 guards in golden armor immediately flew towards Ji Tianxing, wanting to capture him on the spot. But at this moment, a majestic voice came from the edge of the square. "Her Royal Highness has arrived." Instantly, the great protector, the 6 gods' messengers, and the geniuses from various countries turned their heads to look at the edge of the square. They saw a team of guards in golden armor, carrying an exquisite and luxurious half-moon-shaped throne, running towards the center of the square. On both sides of the throne, there were two female guards in silver armor, holding halberds in their hands. On the golden throne, there was a little girl who was 3 feet tall and looked like she was carved from jade. The little girl was wearing a fiery red long dress and she was barefooted. She had a head of light golden hair and she looked very cute. But her little face was tense and her expression was cold. Her aura was also very majestic. Seeing this, many geniuses were puzzled. Which country's princess was this? When the great protector and the 6 gods' messengers saw the arrival of the little princess's throne, their faces turned solemn and respectful. "Welcome, your royal highness." The great protector and the 6 gods' messengers immediately went up and bowed in unison. Seeing this, the geniuses from various countries were shocked and their eyes were filled with shock. The great protector of the martial sage realm and the 6 gods' messengers are actually so respectful to the princess? The 7 white-haired top powers whose ages added up to a few thousand years, are actually so respectful to the little girl? Even if the 6 sage emperors were present, they would not receive such treatment, let alone the princesses of various empires. At this thought, the geniuses from various countries immediately guessed the identity of Her Royal Highness. This little princess was definitely not the princess of any empire, but the princess of the Holy Kingdom. In the blink of an eye, the guards in golden armor carried the throne to the center of the square and stood still. Sitting on the throne, Zhou looked down at the great protector and the 6 gods' messengers and said coldly, "A good ceremony to worship has been completely ruined by you." Her cold voice was filled with anger. The great protector and the 6 gods' messengers were instantly shocked, and they lowered their heads in fear. Ordinary people would not be able to interact with Her Royal Highness Zhou and they would not know her character. However, the great protector and the rest knew that although Her Royal Highness looked cute, once she was enraged she would definitely be a demonic girl who would destroy the heavens and earth. The great protector was nervous and he quickly explained, "My Royal Highness, just now in the Holy Hall, I was conducting the ceremony to worship the princess." Xianxia was arrogant and rude and offended the Holy Master. However, before he could explain what had happened, Zhou waved her small hand and interrupted him. "Of course I know what had happened. You don't have to say anything." When the great protector saw that she was filled with anger, he thought that she was angry because the ceremony had been ruined and the mountain peak had been destroyed. Therefore he quickly reported, "My Royal Highness, please calm down. This matter was due to my negligence. I did not expel Xianxia in time and caused the Holy Master to be angry and the heavens and earth to change. According to the laws of the holy nation, I have announced Xianxia's crime and punishment in public. His status as a candidate for God's disciple will be abolished and he will be demoted to a servant. He will be sent to the Spirit Beast Valley." Zhou looked at the great protector coldly. After he finished speaking, she reprimanded him coldly, "That's right. As the great protector, you did not manage the situation and you did not do your duty. However, do you think that the heavens and earth changed and the scene of the holy thunder were really caused by the Holy Master's anger? How holy and merciful is the Holy Master? How broad was his mind? How could it be something that you could imagine? How can the Holy Master send down such a punishment and anger just because a person was disrespectful?" When the great protector heard what she had said, he was stunned. The 6 gods' messengers and many geniuses also changed their expressions. The same thought appeared in everyone's mind. If the scene of the wind, clouds, thunder and lightning and the heavens and earth changing was not caused by the Holy Master's anger and holy punishment, then what was it? If the holy thunder of punishment and the heavens and earth changing were not to punish Xianxia, were they to punish the great protector? Chapter 1509. Everyone found it hard to believe Zhou's words and they were all shocked. However, Zhou's identity was unparalleled. Among everyone present, only she was qualified to say such words, and only she understood Divine Lord Taihao. After all, she was the princess of the God Nation, the daughter of the Divine Lord. If she believed that the great change in the world was not caused by the Divine Lord's anger, then it was definitely not. Just as everyone was in a daze, Zhou announced in a dignified tone, "The Divine Lord has always been wise and virtuous and cherishes talents. This is known to all the citizens of the God Nation. The Great Guardian's judgment is a little unreasonable, and does not fit the Divine Lord's benevolence. Therefore, I now announce that Ji Tianxing's status as a candidate for a god's disciple will be restored, and he will be punished to clean the divine book pavilion for half a year. This is a small punishment. Hearing this, the great guardian and the messenger's expressions changed drastically, and they stared at Jiu with their eyes wide open. They could not believe it and could not understand. Everyone was extremely confused and they exclaimed to themselves, "Why would the little highness make such a judgment? This is too unreasonable, isn't it? Punishing Ji Tianxing to clean the divine book pavilion? Isn't this an overt punishment and a covert reward?" The divine book pavilion is the top secret place of the Clear Sky Pagoda, and it contains countless ancient books, Taoist scriptures and secret skills. Not to mention ordinary God's disciples, even messengers like us only have the chance to enter once or twice a year. The little highness actually wants Ji Tianxing to clean the divine book pavilion? Isn't this a great gift and reward? The little highness's decision must have a deeper meaning. What ability does this Ji Tianxing have to be able to obtain his highness's protection and appreciation? Not only the great guardian and the god masters had complicated expressions, but their hearts were also filled with shock and confusion. There were also a few young geniuses who had heard of the divine book pavilion of the Clear Sky Pagoda, and they knew that it was the holy land of books that the experts of the Six Nations dreamed of. These geniuses were Qin Songqiong, Jiang Ningxue, Song Zhanyu and the rest. They frowned in confusion and looked at Ji Tianxing with burning eyes. They were very wary of him. They were all very clear that Ji Tianxing must have some outstanding aspects, which was why he could cause such a big disturbance and even obtain the protection of the little princess. On the surface, punishing Ji Tianxing to the divine book pavilion to clean was the little princess punishment for him. But in reality this was a huge benefit. The thousands of ancient books and records in the divine book pavilion, as well as all kinds of divine skills, were all open for Ji Tianxing to read and study. Even if the geniuses were to clean the divine book pavilion, they would be more than happy to oblige. The great guardian frowned and pondered for a moment. He then cupped his hands and said to Jiu, "Your Highness, you're being too merciful by punishing Ji Tianxing like this." Without waiting for him to finish, Jiu waved her hand and said with a dignified expression, "I have already made up my mind. Carry it out immediately. There must be no mistakes." The words that the great guardian didn't say were all stuffed back down his throat. He could only respectfully bow and say, "Yes, sir." Then the golden armored guards carried the throne and left the square. The few divine envoys also brought the geniuses from the various countries out of the square and returned to their residences. The great guardian glanced at Ji Tianxing with a complicated expression before ordering the guards to escort Ji Tianxing to the divine book pavilion. 2 golden armored guards, one on the left and one on the right, escorted Ji Tianxing to the vast heaven pagoda. The divine book pavilion was located at the top of the vast heaven pagoda. It was heavily guarded and a true divine level array was set up. Even if a martial saint expert came, they could not possibly force their way into the divine book pavilion either. When Ji Tianxing trio walked to the bottom of the vast heaven pagoda and was about to enter the wide and solemn door, a team of golden armored guards carried a throne and arrived outside the door of the vast heaven pagoda. On the half-moon-shaped throne sat a little girl who looked like she was carved from jade. It was Jiu. Ji Tianxing trio stopped in their tracks. The 2 golden armored guards hurriedly knelt down and bowed to Jiu. Jiu waved her hand, indicating for the 2 guards to retreat for the time being. She looked at Ji Tianxing with a somewhat complicated expression. With a calm tone she warned, "Tianxing, I can only help you up to this point. I know that the God-disciple examination in half a year is very important to you. In this half a year, you can stay in the divine book pavilion and work hard on your cultivation." Ji Tianxing naturally knew that Jiu punished him to clean up the divine book pavilion as a special favor to him. He nodded to Jiu and said with a sincere tone, "Jiu, thank you for helping me so much." Jiu was still a little worried. She warned again, "Tianxing, since such a thing has happened in the vast heaven pagoda, I must return to the divine country to resolve this matter. The great guardian is a fair and strict person and even a little unreasonable. After I leave I may have to wait for a few months before returning. In this half a year try not to go out. Just stay in the divine book pavilion and don't have any conflicts with the great guardian." Ji Tianxing nodded with a calm expression and did not say anything. As for the truth of the matter, only he knew in his heart. Previously he had already reprimanded the great guardian in front of everyone. At this moment he did not want to explain anything. After that, Zhu bid farewell to him and left on the throne. 2 golden armored guards brought Ji Tianxing into the vast heaven pagoda. The interior of the sacred and lofty vast heaven pagoda was also very solemn. The hall was vast and magnificent. Normally, the vast heaven pagoda's doors were always tightly shut. It was rarely opened. All the god disciples and candidates were not allowed to enter without orders and permission. The first and second levels of the divine pagoda were spacious and bright halls. There were rows of black stone doors in the surroundings. Every stone door was tightly shut. Mysterious and profound arrays were carved on it, as well as various special patterns. Different names were written on the lintel of the doors. For example, Small Spirit Sky, Pure Jade Sea, Lava World, Ancient Desolate Desert, and so on. Ji Tianxing roughly glanced at it. He felt puzzled and secretly guessed. Could it be that behind those stone doors there are secret rooms with different environments? Or could it be that every stone door has a passageway that leads to different alternate spaces? After 15 minutes, the 2 golden armored guards brought him to the 5th level of the vast heaven pagoda. The 5th and 6th levels of the divine pagoda were the sacred divine book chambers. There were thousands of ancient books, ancient records and secret techniques. The 2 golden armored guards handed Ji Tianxing to a white-haired old woman in a black robe and long skirt. After explaining the situation, they left. This black-robed old woman looked to be white-haired. Her body was as thin as a bamboo pole and her skin was as dry as tree bark. Her entire body was shrunk in the black robe. Only a pair of turbid green eyes could be seen. She looked somewhat sinister and strange. However, Ji Tianxing could feel that the old woman's aura was strong and mysterious. She was a martial sage. The old woman was the pavilion elder who guarded the divine book chambers. She was also the second guardian of the vast heaven pagoda. Her status was similar to that of the great guardian. When she found out that Ji Tianxing was punished by Zhu to clean up the divine book chambers, a glint of light flashed past her eyes. She arranged a secret room for Ji Tianxing to stay in and let him settle down. Chapter 15:10. Although the Divine Book Pavilion is the core of the Clear Sky Pagoda, and there are over 18 million ancient books and records stored within. But cleaning the Divine Book Pavilion is an extremely easy task. Normally, very few people enter the Divine Book Pavilion, and this place is protected by an array, so it is impossible for dust to accumulate here. The second guardian's voice was deep and hoarse, as he slowly explained the situation to Ji Tianxing. Normally you just stay in the secret room and don't bother about those books. Go there every day to check which books are not placed properly and just place them properly. If some books are too old and need to be repaired or rewritten, you can bring them to me. When she spoke, she was like an old bellows, as if she could stop breathing at any time, and occasionally she would cough a few times. Ji Tianxing listened quietly, and when she finished he opened his mouth to ask, "If there is nothing else, then I will take my leave." "Wait a moment." The second guardian waved his withered hand and warned in a low voice, "The Divine Book Pavilion is divided into 2 levels, and you can only move around the 5th level. Without my permission you cannot enter the 6th level." Ji Tianxing knew that the 6th level definitely hid important secrets or top-secret techniques, so he could not casually enter. He nodded his head to show that he understood, and cupped his hands to bid farewell to the second guardian, before turning around and returning to the secret room. The second guardian looked at his departing figure, and a strange glow flashed across his muddy old eyes. This kid was actually punished by the young highness seems a little interesting. She had guarded the Divine Book Pavilion for over 1,000 years, and had long been used to this kind of quiet and dull life. Darkness and loneliness had accompanied her for many years, causing her to grow old, and there was not the slightest bit of life in her body. In these 1,000 years she had spent 90% of her time alone, hiding in the darkness. Now that someone had come to the Divine Book Pavilion and had to stay here for half a year, in the next few months she should not be lonely and dull. In reality, it was not that Ji Tianxing was not interested in the Divine Book Pavilion. At this moment the things that had happened before kept replaying in his mind. He only wanted to enter the secret room as soon as possible and quietly think for a while. There were no furnishings in the gloomy secret room, only a futon made of spiritual jade. Ji Tianxing sat cross-legged on the praying mat and closed his eyes to meditate. Soon he calmed his mind. When his mind and spirit became one, the image appeared in the depths of his soul. They were still high up in the sky at the peak of the vast sea of clouds. Martial god Taihao and Kenshin stood proudly in the air and talked to one another. At this moment there was nothing to disturb him. The image in the depths of his soul was incomparably clear. Every glance and action of martial god Taihao and Kenshin was clearly reflected in his soul. He watched the scene of the two deities sparring again, memorizing their expressions, reactions and movements as well as every word they said. After a long time the soul image dissipated. He frowned and muttered to himself, "The sword is in the heart, in the world outside the void but not in the hand." These were Kenshin's exact words. With these words, Kenshin was able to convince martial god Taihao and make him bow his head and admit defeat. However, Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a long time, but he still couldn't understand the meaning of these words. He also couldn't understand why martial god Taihao would willingly admit defeat and respect Kenshin so much after hearing these words. Maybe my cultivation is too low. I haven't reached the martial god realm, so I can't understand the mysteries behind these words. He firmly remembered Kenshin's words and put this matter aside for now. Then he remembered the statue of martial god Taihao in the temple. Behind the lifelike statue, the wall was carved with pictures of mountains, rivers, the sun, the moon, and stars. At the time he saw with his own eyes that there was a very special picture on the wall. The picture was as big as a wash basin. The lines were simple and abstract, as if they contained some deep meaning. He carefully pondered for a while and came up with an answer in his mind. That special and mysterious picture, is it a kind of seal that represents Divine Lord Taihao's status and authority? In the world of martial arts, many powerful organizations, empires and aristocratic families had their own emblems and seals to show their strength and noble status. A martial god like Divine Lord Taihao, one of the three overlords of the Shenwu continent, would definitely have a corresponding seal. When he thought of this, he immediately recalled the ancient book he had found in the imperial palace before leaving the Tianxian continent. At the end of the ancient book there was also a mysterious seal. He compared that mysterious seal with martial god Taihao's seal and confirmed that they were not the same. What does the seal in that ancient book mean? Which organization does it represent? Ji Tianxing was full of doubts, but after thinking for a while he came up with a solution. Right, this is the Divine Tome Pavilion and it has a collection of more than 10 million ancient books. According to the second protector, the ancient books here not only record all kinds of divine techniques, but also the history and secrets of the Shenwu continent over the past 10,000 years. I'll go to the Divine Tome Pavilion to look for information. Perhaps I can find some information about that seal. After making up his mind, Ji Tianxing stood up and walked out of the secret room. He arrived at the 5th level of the Divine Tome Pavilion and looked at the thousands of neatly arranged bookshelves with an expectant gaze. There were more than 5,000 bookshelves in the spacious and bright hall, and they were divided into 5 different areas according to their categories. Some areas were filled with books on cultivation methods, some were filled with books on medicine and pills, and some were filled with books on the Tao of formations. He found the area that stored the history books and biographies and sat down cross-legged on the ground. He circulated his energy and released his divine sense, enveloping hundreds of bookshelves. There were more than 1 million books in this area, and flipping through them with one's eyes was definitely a huge undertaking. Using his divine sense to read was undoubtedly the fastest method. Time quickly passed and before he knew it, a day had passed. Throughout the day he had used his divine sense to read more than 100,000 books, absorbing a vast amount of words and knowledge. This allowed him to gain a deeper understanding of the Shenwu continent's words and history. His greatest gain was finding out the origin of that mysterious seal, as well as information and deeds related to Kenshin. As for the mysterious mark, it wasn't a secret at all. This was because that mysterious seal was the insignia of one of the 3 overlords of the Shenwu continent, the Luoshui martial god. After understanding this point, Ji Tianxing's doubts were easily resolved, and a huge rock that had been hanging in the air was lifted. It's actually the Luoshui martial god seal, which means that the prefecture lord is working for the Luoshui martial god. Since the prefecture lord brought Yao Yao to the Shenwu continent, he must have sent her under the Luoshui martial god. Chapter 1511. Ji Tianxing had managed to find out Yun Yao's whereabouts with just a few clues. Although he could not see Yun Yao for the time being, he believed that there would be results in half a year. In this half a year, what he needed to do was to frantically increase his strength. When he had checked the mysterious imprint, he had used his consciousness to scan hundreds of thousands of ancient books. These books recorded the history of Shenwu continent, as well as the events of the past few thousand years. There were thousands of history books that mentioned Kenshin's deeds and news. Ji Tianxing calmed down and recalled the contents of these books. He quickly sorted out his thoughts. He also had a clearer understanding of the sword god's life and the various legends and deeds he had done. 1,580 years ago, a mysterious white-robed youth had appeared on the Shenwu continent. At that time he had been a nobody and he had been alone. He wore a white robe and a pair of cloth shoes, and he held an ancient pitch-black sword as he walked the world. No one knew where he had come from and no one knew where he had gone. His cold arrogance and loneliness seemed to have been innate, making it impossible for anyone to approach him. His first battle was the battle that had made him famous. The top youth genius of the Misty Flow Empire, a powerhouse at the 9th level of the primordial spirit realm, had been defeated by a single sword strike at the peak of the imperial city. His unfathomable and transcendent swordsmanship caused many experts to exclaim in admiration. In a short 3 years, the white-robed youth had appeared in a neighboring country. 2 Tribulation Realm powerhouses had led many primordial spirit powerhouses to besiege him. On Moonset Peak, he had single-handedly killed more than 10 primordial spirit powerhouses with his sword, and he had even destroyed the souls of the 2 Tribulation Realm powerhouses. It was said that at that time his sword light had traversed 15,000 kilometers, and his sword had been like the moon splitting the heavens. From then on, the white-robed youth had gained a name and he was known as Kenshin. In the following 30 years, Kenshin was like a traveler, crossing over a dozen empires. The name Kenshin had attracted countless criticisms, as well as attacks for no reason. However, he had crossed over the territories of the 3 divine kingdoms and fought with various powerhouses. He had fought thousands of times, but he had never been defeated. From 3rd Tribulation Martial Lords to 5th Tribulation Martial Lords to 9th Tribulation Martial Lords, they were all defeated by his sword. He had once been surrounded and heavily injured, his blood staining the sky. However, he would rather break than submit and press forward courageously. 30 years later, when he arrived at the martial holy land of the Luo River Divine Nation, he was already a martial saint. From then on, people were surprised to find that the sword in Kenshin's hand had disappeared. No matter how strong his opponent or enemy was, he was always empty-handed. The mysterious black sword would only appear out of thin air at the critical moment of his battle with the enemy and defeat him with a single strike. Legend has it that Kenshin was carefree and unrestrained throughout his life. He was not bound by anyone and never owed anyone favors. After he had reached the martial sage realm, he had set up a training ground at the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and used the 9 heavens wind lightning flame to practice his swordsmanship. Furthermore, he had announced that he was inviting martial saints from all over the world to challenge him. In just 20 years he had defeated more than 30 martial sages and had never been defeated. Kenshin's name was like the sun in the sky, and he had intimidated the entire Shenwu continent. He was second only to the 3 martial gods. However, for some reason when his reputation was at its peak, he had disappeared for 20 years. No one knew where he had gone during those 20 years. However, when Ji Tianxing saw this information and combined it with the history he had learned in the Tianxian continent, he immediately guessed the answer. During those 20 years, Kenshin had gone to the Tianxian continent to suppress the ancient demon emperor. Many years later, in a secret realm of the Luo River Divine Nation, a divine light that covered the sky lit up. Half of the divine nation was covered by this light, and it did not disappear for 3 months. According to the historical records, this divine light was a phenomenon of a martial saint becoming a martial god. Not long after, a piece of shocking news spread from the Luo River Divine Nation's divine palace. Kenshin had returned. Moreover, Sword God and Luoshui Martial God had fought in the 9 heavens and defeated Luoshui Martial God in 3 moves. After that, Kenshin had even enlightened Martial God Luo River, allowing him to comprehend on the spot and reach the realm of great perfection in his divine arts. When this news spread, the entire Shenwu continent was in an uproar, and Kenshin's name became well known. In the following years, it was said that martial god Taihao and martial god Tianjue had challenged Kenshin. However, without exception they were all defeated by the sword god in less than 3 moves. From then on, Kenshin had become the undisputed #1 powerhouse, and he had even surpassed the 3 martial gods. After all, in the tens of thousands of years since ancient times, no one had been able to go from the primordial spirit realm to the martial god realm in just 80 years. This was the #1 monster that had never been seen before and would never be seen again. However, after Kenshin had reached the martial god realm, he had not stayed in the Shenwu continent for too long. 1,500 years ago, Kenshin had ascended from the peak of Tianju Mountain and left the continent for the higher realms. After this news spread, the world's powerhouses were once again in an uproar, and they all worshipped Kenshin to the extreme. The 3 martial gods and countless martial saints were even searching for the things that Kenshin had left behind, hoping to find a way to ascend to the higher realms. The historical records clearly stated that after the War of the Gods had ended in ancient times, this world had been sealed by the gods. The 5 continents had been isolated, and the heavens and earth had been sealed by invisible shackles, preventing anyone from ascending to the higher realms. In the 30,000 years since ancient times, several martial gods had appeared on the Shenwu continent. However, those martial gods had been restricted by the heavens and earth's seal, and they had never been able to ascend. In the end, they could only die of old age, turning into withered bones and yellow earth, leaving behind endless regrets. Kenshin's successful ascension had brought hope to the entire world, and it had also allowed the powerhouses of the world to see the light. However, countless powerhouses had searched through everything related to Kenshin, but they had not been able to find any clues about how to ascend to the higher realms. Everyone had despaired, and in the end they could only give up regretfully. For the next 500 years, the 3 martial gods had used some special methods to obtain information about Kenshin. It was said that Kenshin had explored the higher realms and reached the pinnacle of martial arts, becoming the ruler of the astral river. However, 1,000 years ago, a shocking piece of news had spread throughout the Shenwu continent. Kenshin had fallen. Kenshin, who had once been able to unleash a single sword beam and intimidate 30 nations with his sword qi, had actually fallen. When the news spread, the heavens and earth shook and millions of warriors knelt on the ground and wept. Countless powerhouses were sad. In outer space, countless stars fell like raindrops, and this continued for 3 days and 3 nights. On the Shenwu continent, dark clouds covered the sky and did not disperse for 7 days. The most dazzling powerhouse had fallen, and the legend of the Way of the Sword had vanished. Kenshin's life story had come to an end, and Ji Tianxing gathered his thoughts and sighed with a heavy heart. In a short 80 years he went from the primordial spirit realm to the martial god realm. The first person to ascend in 30,000 years, the ruler of the astral river. Chapter 15:12. Time passed silently. The following month passed in complete silence. Only Ji Tianxing and the second enforcer remained in the Divine Tome Pavilion. The second enforcer was nowhere to be seen, either napping in the darkness or resting with his eyes closed. The two rarely met, nor did they speak to each other. The entire Divine Tome Pavilion was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. During this month, Ji Tianxing remained on the 5th floor of the Divine Tome Pavilion, not taking a single step out. He did not cultivate but instead flipped through the ancient books on the various bookshelves. With his powerful perception and photographic memory, he quickly learned the Shenwu continent's language and knowledge as well as its history and geography. In just a month he had read more than 300,000 books and scrolls. He understood the history of the Shenwu continent, the origins and situation of the 3 divine kingdoms, and the rise and fall of the various empires. He even knew the territories of the 10 or so Lian air empires, as well as the famous mountains and cities within their borders. The ancients once said that reading 10,000 books was like walking 10,000 miles. Ji Tianxing remained in the Divine Tome Pavilion, not taking a single step out. In just a month he had read more than 300,000 books, and it was as if he had traversed the entire Shenwu continent. This feeling of knowing the world and reaping bountiful rewards left him in a good mood. It would also be of great help to his future plans. At the very least he would know where the Luoshui Divine Kingdom was and where the sacred land of martial arts was. If he left the Clear Sky Pagoda and went to the Luoshui Divine Kingdom to find Yun Yao, which route should he take? Early in the morning, Ji Tianxing stood in front of the bookshelves as usual, quietly flipping through the books. The ancient black book in his hands was called Travels to the North, and it contained some records about the Pillar of Heaven. Just as he was engrossed in reading, a thin figure wrapped in a black robe silently appeared beside him. Under the loose black robe, half of the person's shriveled old face was revealed. She had a lock of white hair and a pair of turbid green eyes. It was none other than the black-robed old woman, the second protector. She glanced at the ancient book in Ji Tianxing's hand and couldn't help but frown. She opened her mouth and said, "Kid, for the past month, you've been reading books without sleep or food. This is a good thing. But why don't you read all those supreme martial arts and secret skills? Instead you read those useless history books and travel books all day long." Ji Tianxing was awakened by her voice. He turned to glance at her and nodded in greeting. Seeing his calm and indifferent look, the second guardian was a little angry. He said in a low voice, "Do you know how many God's disciples and experts dream of entering the holy land of martial arts? There are millions of books on the bookshelf. You just have to pick a few to cultivate and it will benefit you for life. You little brat, you've wasted the young highness' good intentions and cultivation. You're actually so ignorant and ignorant. You're really disappointing." Her voice was low and hoarse. She looked at Ji Tianxing with eyes full of disappointment as if she expected better from him. Ji Tianxing slowly closed the black ancient book and raised his eyebrows as he looked at the second guardian. He pointed at the bookshelves that stored the cultivation method manuals and asked, "Second guardian, are you asking me to read those cultivation method manuals?" You know the answer. You're really a rotten wood that can't be carved." The second guardian looked angry and snorted with displeasure. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said indifferently, "Those cultivation method manuals are all mediocre. There's no need to look at them." "What?" The second guardian frowned and stared at him. A touch of anger flashed in his sharp eyes. "What an arrogant kid. You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. It's a pity that the young highness' efforts have gone down the drain." In the second guardian's view, Ji Tianxing was not only a piece of rotten wood, but also an idiot who didn't know what was good for him. She didn't want to argue with Ji Tianxing. She just felt that it was not worth it for the young princess. However, she didn't think that Ji Tianxing was telling the truth. The books in the Divine Book Pavilion were indeed worthless to him. There was no need to waste time looking at them. Compared to the Heavenly Book Pavilion in Kenshin's tomb, how could the books here be considered worthless? They were simply rubbish. In this Divine Book Pavilion, the only books that Ji Tianxing found useful were the history books and geographical travel notes. After a moment of silence, the second guardian's anger gradually subsided. She said coldly, "Just now, a guard came to report that the envoy of the White Knight Empire had escorted a batch of books to the foot of Mount God Bestowment. You immediately rush down the mountain to receive the books from the White Knight Empire and bring them back to the Divine Book Pavilion." Ji Tianxing had already stayed in the Divine Book Pavilion for a month. He knew where the 10 million books came from. The 6 empires had been collecting all kinds of books to offer to the Clear Sky Pagoda regularly. After countless years of accumulation, the books in the Divine Book Pavilion could reach such a scale. Ji Tianxing put down the black ancient book, cupped his hands to the second guardian and turned to leave. He calmly left the Divine Book Pavilion, walked out of the Clear Sky Pagoda, and flew down Mount God Bestowment. He knew that Mount God Bestowment was the holy land of martial arts of the Clear Sky Kingdom. It was also the place where martial god Clear Sky taught. The people of the 6 empires could not casually approach this holy land. Without the permission of the Clear Sky Pagoda, no one could ascend Mount God Bestowment. Otherwise, it would be an affront to the authority of the Divine Master and would be severely punished. The envoy of the White Knight Empire could only wait at the foot of Mount God Bestowment. He was not qualified to ascend the mountain. At the foot of the steep Mount God Bestowment, there was an open space with a radius of 10,000 feet. This open space was relatively flat, and the ground was paved with white marble, forming a small square. There was a huge stone tablet erected in the square, and the words Mount God Bestowment were engraved on it. In addition, there was a line of small red words on the stone tablet. It said, "Holy Land of Martial Arts, no trespassing." Usually, if the warriors and commoners of the 6 empires wanted to make a pilgrimage to Mount God Bestowment, they would come to this square to pay their respects to Mount God Bestowment. At this moment, there were 2 majestic middle-aged men in black armor in the square. Both of them were burly and had a dignified aura. They were dressed like generals. The man on the left had thick eyebrows and big eyes. He was at the 9th level of the Essence Soul realm. The man on the right had a thin face. His eyes flickered with a sharp aura. His strength was at the 1st level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. The 2 of them stood side by side in the square, looking up at the sea of clouds above. Their expressions were grave. While waiting, the 2 of them were secretly discussing through voice transmissions. General Du, we are under the Sage Emperor's orders. We are taking the opportunity of paying tribute to the book collection to come to the Clear Sky Pagoda to find Ji Tianxing. We are waiting for an opportunity to snatch the Burial of Heaven sword. This plan was originally flawless, but we can't even ascend Mount God Bestowment. What should we do? Deputy General Li, don't be anxious. This is a holy land of martial arts. We cannot be rash. It doesn't matter even if we can't enter. We have already gotten a guard to send a transmission jade slip to Song Zhanyu. Chapter 15:13. The morning sun slowly rose to the sky. General Du and Deputy General Li waited in the square for 2 hours, but no one came to receive the book. Both of them were a little anxious, but because of the order they could only wait patiently. Not long after, a white figure suddenly flew out of the sea of clouds halfway up the mountain. It was a young man in a white robe flying in the wind and landing from Mount God Bestowment. Seeing the white-robed young man appear, Deputy General Li was relieved and said with relief, General Du, that person should be here to receive the tribute. When we hand in the tribute, the task will be completed. General Du nodded and said, after handing in the tribute, we will hide under Mount God Bestowment and wait for that guy to appear. It is said that the other 2 empires also know about the news of the Sword of Burial of Heaven, and they seem to be secretly moving and sending people here. At that time things will be very tricky. Deputy General Li had been looking up at the sky, watching the white-robed figure getting closer and closer. Suddenly he frowned and a flash of light flashed in his eyes. He asked, General Du, look at that white-robed young man, why does he look so familiar? Familiar? General Du was stunned for a moment. He fixed his eyes on the white-robed young man in the sky, and suddenly his face changed. He does look familiar. This person's figure, appearance and style of clothing are a bit like Ji Tianxing. As General Du said, a white light flashed in his palm and a picture scroll appeared. In the picture scroll was a white-robed young man, holding a dark and mysterious sword. It was Ji Tianxing and the Sword of Burial of Heaven. General Du glanced at the picture, and then looked up at the white-robed young man in the sky, and a flash of surprise flashed in his eyes. It's really him. Great God is really helping me. I didn't expect that the person who came to receive the tribute was Ji Tianxing. It's really a case of searching high and low for something and finding it without any effort. As he said this, a white light flashed in his palm and the picture scroll was put away. Deputy General Li was also very excited and he asked, General Du, should we do it directly or after handing in the tribute? General Du sneered inwardly and warned him with a sound transmission, don't worry. Hand in the tribute first. After confirming his identity you can snatch the sword. Deputy General Li hesitated and asked in a rather worried manner, but we've come as envoys. If we directly take action and the matter is exposed, won't we cause trouble for the Saint Emperor? General Du was startled for a moment and said in a cold tone, let's seize the sword first. If he wants to die then we'll kill him. Anyway, he is just a candidate of a god's disciple. When the time comes there will be no evidence. If we don't act today we won't have another chance in the future. Hearing this, Deputy General Li no longer hesitated and made up his mind. Not long after, Ji Tianxing descended from the sky and landed on the square. He stood in the field expressionlessly and looked at General Du and Deputy General Li indifferently. The 2 of them hurriedly went up to Ji Tianxing and stood in front of him. They put on a respectful posture and bowed. The envoy of the White Knight Empire is here to deliver the tribute under the orders of the Holy Emperor. May I ask if this young master is here to deliver the tribute? Yes. Ji Tianxing glanced at the 2 of them and nodded slightly. Present the tribute. General Du quickly took out a black ring from his sleeve and handed it to him respectfully. Young master, there are more than 7,000 books in this ring, including 2,000 volumes of alchemy books, 3,000 volumes of secret methods, and more than 1,000 volumes of array diagrams. General Du looked at Ji Tianqing with a smile and introduced the number of tributes to him. However, Ji Tianqing was not interested in this. He said with an indifferent expression, "Thank you for your trouble. Please go back." After that he put away the black ring and turned to leave. "Wait." General Du shouted and said, "Please tell us your name and let us know who the tribute is delivered to. It will be convenient for us to go back and report to the Saint Emperor." Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing said his name and flew to the sky without looking back. He was about to leave. After confirming Ji Tianqing's identity, General Du did not hesitate and immediately attacked. A golden light flashed in his palm and a dark golden sword appeared. He waved the sword at Ji Tianqing without any explanation. Zhoosh! The incomparably sharp sword light instantly streaked across the sky and ruthlessly slashed at Ji Tianqing's back. Boom! In the muffled sound, the golden light splashed and Ji Tianqing was sent flying by the sword light. The white robe on his back had a large hole torn open by the sword light, revealing a shallow blood stain that seeped with blood. Fortunately, his physical defense was strong and he was suddenly attacked, but he only suffered a minor injury. If it was an ordinary 5th-level Essence Soul Master, he would have been cut in half on the spot. The sudden change made Ji Tianqing's face change dramatically. He turned around and looked at General Du and Deputy General Li, his eyes emitting a cold light. "You are courting death." He shouted angrily and immediately stabilized his body and stopped at the edge of the square. Zhoosh! A black light flashed in his right hand and the Sword of Burial of Heaven appeared in his hand, emitting a cold and powerful aura. "Ji Tianqing, if you know what's good for you, hand over the Sword of Burial of Heaven and I can spare your life." General Du growled with a murderous look. Ji Tianqing heard and was shocked. "These two know about the Sword of Burial of Heaven? And they want to snatch my sword." Before he could think carefully, General Du and Deputy General Li had rushed in front of him. The two of them attacked him from the left and right, waving their swords and slashing out sword light that covered the sky and earth. Hundreds of crisscrossing sword light not only contained the power to destroy heaven and earth, but also flashed with traces of purple lightning. This was the proof of a Tribulation Realm Master. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and looked serious. The mana in his body also burst out crazily. Dharma body of heaven and earth. He used his secret skill and drew the power of heaven and earth within 1,000 miles to condense an oval-shaped 5-colored shield to protect himself. The sword light that descended from the sky slashed the shield fiercely, causing a loud kacha-kacha sound to ring out. In the blink of an eye, the 5-colored shield was smashed and dissipated on the spot. Ji Tianqing was also hit by dozens of sword light and was sent flying into the valley thousands of feet away. His Heaven and Earth Dharma body secret skill was a secret skill with strong defensive power. Even a 7th or 8th tier Essence Soul Realm Master might not be able to defeat it. But General Du's strength had reached the Tribulation Realm. Deputy General Li, who was slightly weaker, also had the strength of a 9th tier Essence Soul Realm Master. The difference in strength between the two parties was too great. They were not at the same level at all. Ji Tianqing was only sent flying and suffered minor injuries. This was enough to shock and disbelief the two of them. Damn brat, he's actually quite capable. He only has the strength of an Essence Soul Realm Master, but he can withstand 2 of our attacks and not die. This is incredible. Cut the crap. Let's end this quickly and snatch the sword in his hand as soon as possible. General Du and Deputy General Li secretly communicated with each other through voice transmission. Then they unleashed their full strength and rushed toward Ji Tianqing with murderous intent, besieging him with all their might. They knew very well that they were at the foot of Mount God Bestowment. The commotion caused by the two parties fighting would quickly alert the golden armored guards. Chapter 15-14. Ji Tianqing was sent flying 10 miles away, leaving the square and falling into the valley. Before he landed, General Du and Deputy General Li rushed over again, waving their swords and sending out dozens of sword auras, enveloping his figure. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing used the spirit concealment step, and his figure disappeared instantly. He passed through the gaps between the sword auras and flew 10 miles away. However, General Du used the Heaven's Eye secret technique and immediately detected his tracks, and chased after him with his sword. Soaring Dragon of the Sky. General Du unleashed all of his power, waving his sword and sending out a sky full of golden light, which condensed into 200-meter-long golden light dragons, charging towards Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing's face was grim. He waved the Burial of Heaven's sword with all of his strength, thrusting out 7 dazzling sword auras. 7-star sword. The 7 blazing white giant swords, surrounded by violent lightning, pierced towards the 2 golden light dragons. Bang 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 bang. With a series of muffled explosions, the golden light dragons and the sword auras exploded at the same time, turning into fragments that covered the sky and earth. The loud noise reverberated in the valley. The violent shockwave wrapped around the fragments, fiercely hitting the mountain walls and the ground. The ground was blasted open with a radius of more than 10 miles, and the surrounding mountain walls also cracked open with huge cracks. Ji Tianxing was once again sent flying 10,000 meters away, and before he could stabilize his body, Deputy General Li attacked from the side again. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Dozens of sharp sword auras all pierced Ji Tianxing. His magical power shield immediately collapsed, and his whole body was also thrown out, crashing heavily into the mountain wall. A large crater was created on the mountain wall, and spiderweb-like cracks appeared, bursting out dust into the sky. Without waiting for him to recover, General Du and Deputy General Li rushed over again with murderous intent. The two of them wanted to use the most violent attacks to kill Ji Tianxing in the shortest time possible and take away the Burial of Heaven sword. Ji Tianxing was beaten back and could only rely on the golden rock wings, the Burial of Heaven sword, and various secret techniques to resist the attacks of the two. However, the 3 of them did not know that there were 2 sharp eyes secretly staring at them. They were 2 black-clothed and bronze-masked powerhouses. They were hiding in a valley about 15 kilometers away. The 2 of them hid in a cluster of rocks, using a special secret technique to merge with the rocks, making it impossible for people to detect them. The 2 of them stared at the battle between Ji Tianxing and the other 2 and talked to each other through voice transmission. Those 2 guys claimed to be envoys of the White Knight Empire, using the opportunity of tribute, forcibly snatched the Burial of Heaven sword. They are really too arrogant. The thin black-clothed man asked the burly old man beside him, Wang Duozhu, aren't those 2 guys afraid of being exposed and bringing trouble to the White Knight Empire? The black-clothed man called Wang said in a playful tone, The Burial of Heaven sword is the first magic sword in the world, a treasure that countless strong men dream of. The White Knight Holy Emperor must have given a death order to let those 2 guys snatch the Burial of Heaven sword no matter what. Isn't our Lord Thousand Snow Holy Emperor the same? She wants us to snatch the Burial of Heaven sword at all costs, even by fair means or foul. The skinny black-clothed man asked anxiously, We have been lurking here for more than 20 days, and it's not easy to wait for Ji Tianxing to appear. We must not miss this opportunity. Wang, I think Ji Tianxing can't hold on any longer. When should we make a move? Deacon Sun, don't worry. Let Ji Tianxing and those 2 guys fight until both sides are injured. Then we'll sit back and reap the benefits. Division Leader Wang's tone was filled with treachery. Deacon Sun was shocked and whispered in disbelief. Both sides are injured? How is this possible? Even if Ji Tianxing has the Burial of Heaven sword in his hand, it's impossible for him to beat those 2. Wang shook his head gently and said in a firm tone, Ji Tianxing is the first genius of the Chuyun Empire. His strength must be extraordinary. Moreover, the Burial of Heaven sword is Kenshin's sword. How can it only have this little power? Be patient and watch. Just as Division Leader Wang finished speaking, a heaven-shaking explosion suddenly came from the valley 15 kilometers away. A giant golden sword over 10,000 feet tall suddenly appeared and slashed viciously at Deputy General Li with a terrifying might. Deputy General Li was sent flying by the giant sword on the spot, vomiting blood as he flew 10 miles away and smashed into the valley. The sudden change also startled General Du, and his face was full of disbelief. Actually, how is this possible? Ji Tianxing stood in the sky with ragged clothes and disheveled hair, casting a spell to control the primordial spirit golden sword that was thousands of feet high. He stared at General Du coldly and shouted in a cold voice, You two, as the envoys of the White Knight Empire, How dare you besiege and kill a candidate of the god's disciple at the foot of Mount God Bestowment? Aren't you afraid that the divine Lord Taihao will punish the White Knight Empire if this matter is exposed? General Du held the sword in his hand, and his whole body was surrounded by electric light. He shouted in a contemptuous tone, "Ji Tianxing, don't flatter yourself. You're just a candidate of the god's disciple and it's no big deal to kill you. The Divine Lord will never care about such a trivial matter, so how can he punish you? If you don't hand over the Burial of Heaven sword, you'll definitely die." As General Du spoke, his whole body surged with electric light, and the phantom of a giant beast that was thousands of feet high appeared behind him. The giant beast looked like a rhinoceros, but it only had one leg, and the two curved horns on its head were surrounded by purple electric dragons. This was General Du's primordial spirit Dharma Laksana, the legendary thunder beast Kuei-Ox. His primordial spirit Dharma Laksana was very special, and it could control thunder and lightning. This was very rare, and countless strong men in the Tribulation realm were envious and in awe. General Du made a Taoist gesture with both hands, and the giant phantom of the Kuei-Ox immediately condensed a huge ball of electric light, which locked onto Ji Tianxing's primordial spirit Dharma Laksana. "Are you going to hand it over or not?" General Du shouted angrily with a murderous look. Ji Tianxing also activated the giant golden sword with all his strength, and tit for tat with General Du he shouted in a deep voice, "You're delusional. Then go to hell." General Du roared angrily. The giant phantom of the Kuei-Ox immediately released the ball of electric light with a radius of thousands of feet, and fiercely bombarded Ji Tianxing. Boom! In an instant the giant ball of electric light bombarded Ji Tianxing's primordial spirit golden sword, and his figure was drowned. However, a scene that stunned General Du appeared. The power of thunder that he was proud of did not hurt Ji Tianxing. Instead, it burst into electric arcs all over the sky, and was quickly swallowed by the golden sword. After the dazzling purple light dissipated, Ji Tianxing's figure appeared and he was unscathed. He stared at General Du coldly and said in a contemptuous tone, "Showing off your slight skill in front of an expert." The next moment he waved his hand and threw out the sword of Burial of Heaven, and shouted in a low voice, "Divine Sword Fusion." Suddenly, the dark and cold sword of Burial of Heaven expanded to thousands of feet in an instant, and merged with his primordial spirit golden sword. Chapter 15:15. General Du knew very well that the power of the Burial of Heaven must be terrifying. Seeing the fusion of the Burial of Heaven and the primordial spirit golden sword, his face suddenly changed, and his eyes were filled with anxiety and worry. With his strength and means, of course he could kill Ji Tianxing. But he couldn't help but worry that Ji Tianxing could use the power of the Burial of Heaven to be in a stalemate with him for a long time. The huge commotion of the two sides fighting must have alarmed the guards on Mount God Bestowment. If he couldn't kill Ji Tianxing as soon as possible, the golden armored guards would soon arrive. By then his plan would be in vain. At this moment, Ji Tianxing had already controlled the giant sword to slash down. Heaven-splitting sword. The giant golden sword, suffused with a hazy black shadow and purple electric light, erupted with a destructive power and instantly struck General Du. He had no chance to dodge at all, and could only activate the Kuei-Ox phantom to block the giant sword. Boom! A loud noise that shook the sky exploded in the valley and spread for hundreds of miles. The giant Kuei-Ox phantom was cut in half on the spot, and the purple light burst out, illuminating the entire valley. General Du also looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His face turned pale and blood spurted from his mouth and nose. His whole body was like a broken sack flying more than 10 miles away and smashing into the rock wall of Mount God Bestowment. The extremely hard dark brown rock wall was smashed into a pit with a radius of 10,000 feet, and dense cracks appeared around it. The sacred and majestic Mount God Bestowment also trembled a few times, making a dull rumbling sound. This sword was the most powerful sword that Ji Tianxing could unleash. Moreover, the fusion of the Burial of Heaven and the primordial spirit golden sword doubled the power of this sword. Because of this, General Du, who was at the first stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm, was sent flying and seriously injured by this sword. The Kuei-Ox phantom that was cut in half quickly disappeared and retracted into General Du's body. His primordial spirit was seriously injured and was lying in the deep pit in the rock wall, buried by countless gravel. Ji Tianxing cast a spell again and controlled the primordial spirit golden sword to slash at the deep pit, wanting to take the opportunity to kill General Du, but at this moment, Deputy General Li rushed out from the side with his injuries. "Little bastard, you're courting death." His eyes were about to burst with anger and he roared with murderous intent. He flew out of the deep pit to help General Du to block the sword. In the sky behind him, a 10,000-meter-tall golden shadow appeared. It was a golden armored giant with 4 arms, each holding a saber, a spear, a sword, and a halberd. Under the control of Deputy General Li's body, the golden primordial spirit golden sword. Boom! With a thunderous explosion, the golden sword struck the golden armored giant. Immediately, the 4 arms of the golden armored giant were chopped off, turning into specks of golden light that dissipated into the sky. The golden sword golden giant was also cut in half and quickly retracted into Deputy General Li's body. Deputy General Li's primordial spirit was seriously injured. He spat out blood and flew back into the deep pit. His robe was ragged and his body was full of cracks. Blood gushed out and dyed him red. He struggled in the pile of gravel and was about to get up to rescue General Du at this moment. Ji Tianxing controlled the primordial spirit golden sword to slash down. Heaven-breaking sword. The giant sword released a golden light that covered the sky and the sun. It had the power to destroy everything and hit Deputy General Li hard. Bang! Deputy General Li was cut into pieces by the giant sword on the spot, and a large rain of blood splattered out. The huge deep pit was also broken and gravel splashed out everywhere. The violent and unparalleled power shook the entire God-sealing mountain violently, and made a deafening muffled sound. Deputy General Li's body was destroyed, and only a severely injured primordial spirit was left. He didn't dare to stay any longer. Panicking, he burrowed into the ground and fled without a trace. General Du's primordial spirit was also seriously injured, but his body was not destroyed and his injuries were slightly lighter. He was also shocked by the terrifying power of the Burial of Heaven sword. His heart was filled with grief and anger and he roared in a hoarse voice, "It really is the Burial of Heaven sword. No wonder it has such a terrifying power. Ji Tianxing, you're lucky this time. You won't be so lucky next time." He let out an unwilling roar and hurriedly used the earth escape secret technique to drill into the rock wall and escape as fast as he could. Ji Tianxing's divine sense could detect the traces of General Du and Deputy General Li. He knew that they were escaping underground. But he didn't chase after them. With his strength and means, it was not enough to kill General Du and Deputy General Li. He could seriously injure them because of the power of the Burial of Heaven sword. If he rashly chased after them, he would have to leave the range of God-sealing mountain. At that time he would encounter greater danger. At the same time, in a valley 15 kilometers away, 2 black-robed experts witnessed the scene with their own eyes. They were so shocked that their hearts were beating wildly, and their eyes were filled with horror. "It's unbelievable. Isn't Ji Tianxing only at the 5th firmament essence soul realm? How can he seriously injure those 2 fellows? They are experts at the 9th firmament essence soul realm and 1st firmament tribulation transcendence realm. Their primordial spirits were seriously injured. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Manager Sun wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. This completely subverted his knowledge of the martial Dao. Division Master Wang was also shocked and his eyes shone brightly. However, he was already mentally prepared and could still maintain his calm. He said in a deep voice, "Don't be too surprised. The one who seriously injured them wasn't Ji Tianxing, but the Burial of Heaven sword. After all, that's Kenshin's sword. It's only natural that it could kill them instantly, much less injure them." Manager Sun was filled with fear as he hurriedly asked, "Division Master Wang, are we still going to snatch the sword? The Burial of Heaven sword is so powerful, and we are only at the 1st firmament tribulation transcendence realm. I'm afraid we won't be able to withstand the terrifying might of the Burial of Heaven sword." Division Master Wang frowned and pondered for a moment before saying in a deep voice, "Of course we have to. Now is the best time to snatch the sword. That Burial of Heaven sword is incomplete, so its power is definitely limited. Ji Tianxing must have exhausted all his dermic powers in order to repel those 2 fellows. Now is the time when he is at his weakest. However, the guards of Mount God's ceiling will be arriving soon. We have to snatch the Burial of Heaven sword within 30 seconds. As he spoke, Division Master Wang silently left the rubble and flew towards Ji Tianxing. Manager Sun hesitated for a moment before hurriedly following. At this moment, Ji Tianxing had just retrieved the golden sword and the Burial of Heaven sword and was about to fly into the sky and return to the peak of Mount God's ceiling. The white robe he was wearing had not only become rags, but it was also stained with dust and blood. His long hair was disheveled and his figure looked quite miserable and weak. In just 2 breaths, Division Master Wang and Manager Sun had crossed more than 30 miles and rushed behind him. Without any hesitation, the two instantly took out their weapons and magic treasures and launched an attack on Ji Tianxing. Division Master Wang held a treasured saber and slashed at Ji Tianxing's back with all his strength. Chapter 15-16. Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun had both reached the first tier of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Ji Tianxing was caught off guard by the sudden attack of the two. Division Leader Wang waved his saber and slashed out dozens of flaming blades, which shrouded Ji Tianxing's figure, preventing him from dodging. Deacon Sun's bronze crossbow was a supreme-grade Essence Soul Realm Dharma treasure. It was extremely powerful. The icy blue arrow shot out from the bronze crossbow was only 3 feet long. It was crystal clear and contained an extremely cold aura. The power of this arrow was extraordinary. It was enough to penetrate the Dharma body of a 9th-level Essence Soul Realm expert and destroy his Essence Soul Dharma idol. The most important thing was that the tiny arrows were not conspicuous in the sky full of flames. They were very well hidden. Ji Tianxing was about to use his sword to block the slash of the saber radiance when the icy blue arrow shot in front of him and was about to pierce his heart. At this critical moment he suddenly felt a cold aura invading his body. It was as if his entire body was about to freeze. He reacted almost instinctively and immediately spread his golden wings to protect himself. Clang! The golden rock's wings had just closed when the icy blue arrow pierced the golden wings. There was a crisp sound of metal clashing. The icy blue arrow instantly shattered into hundreds of ice shards. The golden rock's wings also trembled violently and flashed with a dark golden light. Immediately after, more than a dozen powerful flaming blades struck the pair of golden wings. There was another dull sound. Ji Tianxing was sent flying and smashed into the ruins not far away. The golden wings trembled violently and the golden light dimmed a little. It was obvious that their power had weakened a lot. Upon seeing this, Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun frowned their eyebrows, as their eyes flickered with excitement. The two of them had been hiding under Mount God's ceiling for more than 20 days. They had patiently watched the battle and waited until the last moment to attack. Originally, they were confident that they would be able to kill Ji Tianxing with a single strike. However, they did not expect that Ji Tianxing, who was already at the end of his rope, still had a trump card that could block their fatal attack. Swoosh! With a flash of golden light, Ji Tianxing unfolded his golden rock wings and revealed his body. He flew out from the rubble ruins and stared at Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun with a sharp gaze. His entire body emitted a killing intent that soared to the heavens. With a cold voice he shouted, "You two also want to steal the sword?" Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun were startled for a moment. Their eyes under the bronze masks revealed sinister sneers. "That's right. Since you know, why don't you hand over the sword of Burial of Heaven?" Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows. Many questions popped up in his mind and anger surged in his heart. Of course, he knew that these two masked men in black were not in cahoots with the previous two. However, he could not understand how these people knew that he had the sword of Burial of Heaven. Why would these two groups of people take such a huge risk to kill people at the foot of Mount God Bestowment and steal the sword? Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun didn't give him any time to think. They immediately brandished their treasured sabers and released their bronze crossbows to attack him. Sky Saber Splitter! Division Leader Wang shouted angrily. He held the black treasured saber with both hands and slashed out 81 times in an instant. Each saber light was hundreds of feet long. They flickered with golden light and were extremely sharp and domineering. The 81 saber lights formed a crisscrossing saber net that descended from the sky toward Ji Tianxing. The saber net sealed the area within a radius of 10 miles, leaving him with no way to escape. Deacon Sun also activated the bronze crossbow with all his strength. He released 3 dark golden arrows that shot toward Ji Tianqing's forehead, throat and heart. Ji Tianqing was in a perilous situation. If he couldn't block the saber lights and arrows, his life would be in danger. At this critical moment, he didn't hesitate to use the primordial spirit golden sword and took out the sword of Burial of Heaven. Burial of Heaven, lend me a hand. He used his divine thought to send a message to the sword soul of Burial of Heaven. In the next moment, the sword of Burial of Heaven expanded to 1,000 feet tall and merged with the primordial spirit golden sword again. Then his body emitted a golden light that shot into the sky. His body turned into a dazzling brilliance and merged with the primordial spirit golden sword. The primordial spirit golden sword was formed by the fusion of the primordial spirit, the sword of Burial of Heaven and Ji Tianqing. Its power had reached its peak. White Tiger Sacred Sword. Following a roar that sounded like a tiger's roar, 1,000 feet long golden sword released a huge white tiger shadow that slashed toward Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sunday. This was one of Kenshin's sword arts, the 4 spiritual sacred sword. Back then, Ji Tianqing was only at the Yuandan realm and he could use this sword technique. However, this secret skill was a sacred sword art that Kenshin had created himself. Only a martial sage would be able to unleash the full power of the sword skill. Now Ji Tianqing was stronger and had a deeper understanding of the sword arts. The power of the White Tiger Sacred Sword was even more terrifying. Kaboom! The huge net formed by the 81 rays of saber radiance was instantly shattered by the White Tiger Sacred Sword and scattered in all directions. The 3 arrows that were shot toward them were also shattered on the spot by the White Tiger Sacred Sword. Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun's attacks were actually so weak under the White Tiger Sacred Sword. The 2 of them looked on helplessly as the huge sword slashed down on them. However, they were suppressed by the terrifying power and had no time to dodge or escape. Their eyes were filled with shock and fear. They were shocked that Ji Tianqing could use such a marvelous sword technique and were fearful of the terrifying power of the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Bang! With a loud muffled sound, Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun were sent flying by the huge golden sword. They crashed into the ground with a loud bang. A huge ravine that was 30 miles long and 10,000 feet wide was formed on the rocky ground. Endless crushed stones flew into the sky and the earth within a radius of a few hundred miles trembled. The majestic Mount God bestowment shook again. At the bottom of the huge ravine, Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun were lying in the ruins covered with blood. Their bodies were covered by the earth and rocks. Fortunately, the 2 of them had the strength of the Tribulation Realm, so they were lucky enough to escape and block the White Tiger Sacred Sword's attack. However, their corporeal bodies were filled with cracks like broken porcelain bowls. Dark golden blood soaked their robes and mixed with the earth. They looked very miserable. Their primordial spirits were also injured by the White Tiger Sacred Sword. Their consciousness was somewhat blurry and drowsy. At this moment, Deacon Sun recalled what Division Leader Wang had said before. After all, that is Kenshin's sword. Not to mention injuring them, even if it killed them instantly, it would be reasonable. He had personally experienced the terrifying power of the Sword of Burial of Heaven and his heart was filled with regret. Damn it! We already knew the terrifying power of the Sword of Burial of Heaven and saw the 2 of them being seriously injured with our own eyes. Why did we also end up like this and repeat the same mistake? At this moment, Ji Tianqing used the secret technique again and his body fused with the huge sword once more. He wanted to use the Vermilion Bird Sacred Sword to deal with Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sunday. The 2 of them suddenly woke up and were filled with anger and worry. Chapter 15-17. Although Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun were both at the first level of the Tribulation Transcendence Realm, they did not know each other. They did not know Ji Tianqing at all, let alone Ji Tianqing's true strength and trump cards. Division Leader Wang's wrong judgment led to them being injured by the White Tiger Sacred Sword. Not only did Ji Tianqing not fall into a weakened state, but he also used an even more powerful ultimate move. If they continued to fight, they would not be able to gain the upper hand at all, and they would not be able to obtain the Sword of Burial of Heaven. When the golden armored guards of Mount God Ceiling arrived, not only would their plan fail but they would also be captured. At that time their identities would be exposed. Swoosh, swoosh. The two of them flew into the sky with all their might, turning into two streams of light and quickly disappearing into the horizon. With Ji Tianxing's strength, he could not catch up to them at all. He could only watch as they escaped. Swoosh! The golden light faded and his figure appeared, standing in the sky. The sword of burial of heaven and the essence soul golden sword quickly separated, shrinking thousands of times and returned to his body. He looked up at the sky and saw a few golden lights flashing through the clouds. A team of golden armored guards was rushing over as fast as lightning. He frowned and thought for a moment, then used the divine concealment step to stay invisible. He went around the golden armored guards and returned to the peak of Mount God ceiling from the side. 800 breaths have passed since I was attacked, and the golden armored guards have only just arrived. They are really slow. Don't tell me they don't care about anything outside of Mount God ceiling? Ji Tianxing hid in the clouds and looked down at the golden armored guards, thinking silently. The golden armored guards rushed to the square at the foot of the mountain and began to search and investigate. However, the valley and flat land within 100 miles had become ruins full of holes and cracks. Even the walls of Mount God bestowment were left with two huge craters and spiderweb-like cracks. Other than that, there were no other clues. The golden armored guards searched the ruins for a long time, but they did not find any clues and could only return empty-handed. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing quietly returned to the peak of Mount God ceiling and entered the clear sky pagoda. Soon he returned to the divine book pavilion. As usual, the second guardian was sitting in the corner of the hall, curled up in an armchair in the dark. Ji Tianxing walked in front of her and calmly reported, "Second protector, I have brought back the books from the White Knight Empire." The second guardian was curled up in his loose black robe. When he heard Ji Tianxing's voice, he opened his turbid green eyes and glanced at him. "Put those books on the bookshelves according to their categories," she ordered slowly, then closed her eyes and continued to nap. Ji Tianxing's white robe was tattered, his hair was messy, and his body was stained with dust and blood. However, she acted as if she did not see it. She did not react at all, nor did she open her mouth to ask. Ji Tianxing glanced at her expressionlessly and turned to walk to the bookshelf not far away. He took out the black ring, took out a few thousand books from it, and arranged them on the corresponding bookshelves according to different categories. An hour later he put all the books on the shelves and returned to the secret room. The previous battle consumed most of his magic power, and he also suffered some minor injuries. Fortunately, with the help of the burial of heaven, he was able to beat back the two waves of attackers. After he treated his injuries, he sat on the futon and closed his eyes to rest, silently pondering. Whether it is the great guardian or the second guardian, they are both unreasonable people. This clear sky pagoda is not like the sky-bearing sect in the monarch mansion that I used to stay in. The rules here are strict and there is no human touch to speak of. The great guardian is cold and strict. The second guardian saw that I was injured but did not care. The golden armored guards also came late. Humph. The so-called Holy Land of martial arts may have some divinity, but there is not much humanity. Ji Tianxing secretly thought in his heart, and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a disdainful sneer. He decided to hide the fact that he was attacked at the foot of the mountain and would never report it to the people of the Clear Sky Pagoda. After all, he had offended the Great Guardian, and even if the Great Guardian knew that he had been attacked, he would most likely turn a blind eye. Most importantly, if he reported this matter to the two guardians and the divine envoys, it would implicate the sword of the burial of heaven. Two groups of people who have nothing to do with me actually ran to the foot of Mount Godseal and took a huge risk to snatch the sword of the burial of heaven. How did they know that the sword of the burial of heaven was in my hands? And why did they try so hard to snatch it? Ever since he had come to Shenwu continent, he had only shown his face in the Outcloud Empire and had never gone to the Day-Night Empire. Now, two envoys from the Day-Night Empire had actually attacked him and tried to snatch the sword of the burial of heaven. He could not help but wonder if the sword of the burial of heaven was hiding some shocking secret that had caused these people to be so crazy about it. Previously, he had read hundreds of thousands of books and had a sufficient understanding of Kenshin's life experiences and legends. He knew that Kenshin was the #1 powerhouse on Shenwu continent, and he was worshipped by millions of warriors. The sword of the burial of heaven that Kenshin was wearing was naturally a divine sword that was known throughout the continent. Although the burial of heaven is a divine sword that everyone knows, 1,000 years have passed, and the burial of heaven in my hands is damaged and incomplete. Who would be able to recognize that it is the sword of the burial of heaven? When he thought of this question, his first reaction was that it was someone from the Outcloud Empire. After I came to Shinwu continent, I only traveled around the Outcloud Empire. The news of the burial of heaven must have been leaked at that time. At that time, Emperor Outcloud personally came to find me and saw my sword of the burial of heaven. Could it be that he recognized the sword of the burial of heaven and spread the news? If not, how could the people of the Daoist Empire know that I have the sword of the burial of heaven? But why didn't Emperor Outcloud directly seize the sword of the burial of heaven after recognizing it? Instead, why did he spread the news and let the powerhouses of other countries come to Mount Godseal to seize the sword? Ji Tianxing analyzed the situation for a while and determined that it was Emperor Outcloud who had recognized the sword of the burial of heaven and spread the news. However, he could not understand why Emperor Outcloud had done this. Was he trying to get someone else to do his dirty work? Emperor Outcloud was a martial saint powerhouse, so there was no need for the emperor of a country to do such a thing. Ji Tianxing pondered for a long time, but he still could not figure out this problem. However, he was certain that a huge conspiracy was coming his way. After a while, he thought of another more important problem. Since Emperor Outcloud could recognize the sword of the burial of heaven, then the first, second, and divine envoys of the Clear Sky Pagoda might also recognize it. Fortunately, I haven't used the sword of the burial of heaven in front of everyone since I came to the Clear Sky Pagoda. If the sword of the burial of heaven was exposed, who knows how much trouble and disturbance it would cause. Looks like I have to be extra careful in the future and hide the sword of the burial of heaven. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I can't use it. After making up his mind, he stretched out his right hand and brought out the sword of the burial of heaven. Just as he was about to put the sword of the burial of heaven into his spatial ring, a clear voice rang out in his mind. Chapter 15:18. Hearing this voice, Ji Tianxing was startled. Soon after, he smiled and sent a voice transmission. "Qian Yu, you've already finished your seclusion?" The voice transmission came from Qian Yu. Ever since he left the profound sky continent, Qian Yu and the little black dragon had been cultivating in seclusion in the sword world. Qian Yu's clear voice rang out in his mind once more. 20 days ago, I finished my seclusion and my strength has increased by a great deal. Old Ji, come in quickly, I've made a great discovery. A great discovery? Ji Tianxing raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. He opened the entrance to the sword world and his figure flashed into the sword world, appearing in the sky above peaceful Earth City. Qian Yu was flying in the blue sky, his body over 300 meters long and his 12 furry tails flickering with an icy blue light. After not seeing him for a long time, Ji Tianxing sized him up and found that his strength had reached the 5th layer of the spirit refining realm. When Qian Yu saw him, she hurriedly flew over, her clear eyes filled with excitement. "Old Ji, come with me, I'll take you to a place." As he spoke, he carried Ji Tianxing on his back and flew towards the northeast of peaceful Earth City. Ji Tianxing was a little confused and asked, "Qian Yu, where are you taking me? What did you discover?" Qian Yu flew through the sky as fast as lightning and said, "Old Ji, the sword world is growing every day, constantly expanding its space. You should know this, right?" "Of course." Ji Tianxing nodded and explained, "As the burial of heaven's strength continues to recover, the sword world will also expand. When the burial of heaven recovers to its peak, the sword world will also return to its original state, becoming a great world." Qian Yu nodded to express his understanding and explained, 20 days ago when I finished my seclusion, I went around the sword world to see how much it had expanded. As a result, I discovered a mysterious forbidden area at the northern border." "Mysterious forbidden area?" Ji Tianxing frowned and asked doubtfully, "What is the forbidden area?" Qian Yu said excitedly, "That forbidden area is in the mountains, sealed by a powerful formation. It looks majestic and magnificent. Unfortunately, with my strength, I can't get close at all, nor can I see the situation inside the forbidden area." Hearing what it said, Ji Tianxing became more confused and expectant. He said seriously, "Take me to see it." Qian Yu sped up, crossing one majestic mountain range after another, rushing towards the end of the horizon. About 2 hours later, Qian Yu finally reached the end of the sword world. Boundless darkness appeared in the sky and on the ground in front of him. It was like an icy void. In the mountains next to the dark zone, there was a huge valley with a circumference of over 200 miles. The valley was surrounded by towering mountain ranges, and it looked like a coiled dragon. In the flat valley, there was a huge light shield with a circumference of 100 miles. It emitted a 7-colored divine light and an incomparably powerful aura. Ji Tianxing and Qianyu came to the top of the valley. They stopped 1,000 feet in the air and looked down at the entire valley. The 7-colored light shield with a circumference of 100 miles was shining with a dazzling brilliance. The light shield was very thick and was not transparent. The situation inside was faintly discernible, making it difficult to see clearly. Invisible shockwaves were emitted from the 7-colored light shield and spread in all directions. Ji Tianxing observed for a moment and saw that this was an incomparably powerful divine-level formation. Perhaps only martial gods could activate it. The invisible shockwaves were just the natural fluctuations of divine power when the divine-level formation was in operation. But to Qianyu, this power of the shockwaves was terrifying enough. It stopped 1,000 feet in the air, desperately resisting the shockwaves, but it seemed to be very difficult. Every time the shockwaves swept past, its huge body would tremble and burst out with an icy blue brilliance. It would consume a large amount of magic power to stay here for even a breath of time. Ji Tianxing saw that it was very uncomfortable and asked it to retreat far away. Then he descended from the sky near the 7-colored light shield and observed it closely. Strangely, the powerful shockwaves from the divine-level formation automatically swept past him and did not cause any impact or pressure on him. He observed carefully around the 7-colored light shield and was not affected in the slightest. After a quarter of an hour, he circled around the divine-level formation and finally saw the situation inside the light shield. The ground within a radius of 100 miles was paved with huge black stones, making it look like an enormous altar. At the top of the altar, there was a huge black stone tablet that was 1,000 meters tall. There seemed to be words carved on the black stone tablet, but he could not see them clearly. He could only sense that the black stone tablet seemed to be similar to the sky sword stele and the 18 tombstones in the Kenshin tomb. An ancient divine tier formation protecting a huge altar and a mysterious stone tablet? Why would these things appear in the sword world? What secrets are hidden in the altar and the stone tablet? With doubts in his heart, Ji Tianxing used his divine sense to send a message to Burial of Heaven. Buried Heaven, I've discovered a god-level formation in the sword world. There's a black altar and a gigantic stone tablet in it. Do you know what this grand formation, altar, and stele are? Burial of Heaven seemed to ponder for a while before replying in a solemn tone. Look carefully at the altar and stone tablet. What do you think they look like? Ji Tianxing stared at the huge altar and stone tablet in the light shield. After a few careful glances, he suddenly frowned. Why do this altar and stone tablet look like a tomb? That's right, Burial of Heaven said in a low voice. That is a tomb, a Kenshin tomb. Ji Tianxing's brows immediately knit together. With a strange expression he asked, Burial of Heaven, that can't be right, right? Isn't the real Kenshin tomb inside my body? Burial of Heaven said in a solemn and respectful voice. There is something I didn't tell you. There are actually 2 real Kenshin tombs, the Yin and Yang tombs. Before Kenshin fell, he used up all of his divine power to construct them. They contain heaven-shaking mysteries and peerless treasures. The Kenshin tomb inside your body is the Yin tomb. It contains Kenshin's sword arts and legacies. The Kenshin tomb in front of you is the Yang tomb. It contains Kenshin's relics and other things. The Yin and Yang tombs? So that's how it is. Ji Tianxing immediately understood. He stared at the Yang tomb with shining eyes and thought to himself. The Yin tomb inside my body not only has 18 tombstones, but also records Kenshin's supreme sword arts. There is another world inside the tombstones that connects the Heavenly Tome Pavilion and the Divine Weapon Pavilion. The importance of this Yang tomb shouldn't be any less than the Yin tomb. I wonder what treasures are stored inside. Chapter 15:19. Ji Tianxing stared at the Yang tomb within the rainbow barrier, his heart filled with anticipation. Burial of Heaven, how can I enter the Yang tomb? Burial of Heaven said calmly. The formation protecting the Yang tomb is a great divine formation. Kenshin personally set it up and incorporated his formation Dao techniques. You can find the method to open it in the Heavenly Sutra Pavilion. Once you reach the Martial God Realm, you should be able to do so. What? I need to reach the Martial God Realm to open it? Ji Tianxing immediately frowned. It'll be at least a few decades before I reach the Martial God Realm. Burial of Heaven, is there any way to open the divine formation ahead of time? Burial of Heaven said indifferently, yes, I can help you open the divine formation. After a pause it added, but not now. My body hasn't recovered and my strength hasn't recovered, so there's no way I can open the divine formation. Unless you can help me repair the sword and restore my strength to around 70%. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and nodded. In comparison, repairing Burial of Heaven's sword should be easier than reaching the Martial God Realm. I can consider this method. But where can I find the materials to repair the divine sword? Burial of Heaven said solemnly, I'll naturally tell you what materials are needed in the future. Everything about Kenshin is buried in the Yin-Yang tombs. If you can combine the tombs one day, you'll be able to discover the earth-shattering treasures that Kenshin left behind. Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed with a shrewd light. He hurriedly asked, what earth-shattering treasures? Burial of Heaven said with some disdain, it's a top secret that can shock the world and shake the 9 heavens. Then what is it? Ji Tianxing's interest was piqued and he grew increasingly curious. Burial of Heaven said gravely, with your current strength and situation, it's best if you don't know. You'll naturally understand once you open the divine formation and enter the Yang tomb. This answer from the Burial of Heaven made Ji Tianxing feel rather helpless. He could only suppress his curiosity and anticipation as he turned around and left the valley. Qianyu was waiting outside the valley. When he saw Ji Yunshu come back, he quickly greeted him and asked, Old Ji, how was it? Did you find any clues? We'll talk about it when we get back. Ji Tianxing flew onto its back and ordered it to return to the peaceful Soil City. An hour later he brought Qianyu back to the peaceful Soil City and used a secret sound transmission technique to summon the Golden Mountain King. After a short conversation, Ji Tianxing realized that the Jinshan King did not know about the 7-colored array. Therefore he warned the Jinshan King, the Great Formation in the valley is a powerful divine grade formation. It is extraordinarily powerful. Don't let anyone get close to it to avoid being accidentally injured. The Jinshan King cupped his hands, indicating that he would do as he was told. Ji Tianxing then turned to Qianyu and said, Qianyu, you don't have to go there anymore. It's too dangerous. Qianyu naturally nodded in agreement. Soon after, Ji Tianxing left the peaceful Soil City and flew to the mountains in the west to visit the Little Black Dragon. According to Qianyu, the Little Black Dragon found a miraculous pool in the depths of the mountains in the west. There seemed to be a spring in the pool that gushed out spiritual water, making the entire pool seem like a paradise. Ever since the Little Black Dragon discovered the pool, it had been coiled up in the pool, unwilling to leave. It had been cultivating in the pool the entire time. Ji Tianxing was curious and wanted to see it for himself. The sword world continued to expand and many wondrous things appeared. This small world was no longer monotonous and became colorful. He was looking forward to the future. When the Burial of Heaven recovered its strength, the sword world would expand into a complete large world. At that time there would be even more wondrous things, right? An hour later he flew to the depths of the mountains in the west. When he was still a few hundred miles away, he saw a 5-colored auspicious cloud in the sky in front of him. This auspicious cloud was over 100 miles in radius and was suspended between several towering mountains. It did not dissipate even when the wind blew. The 5-colored auspicious cloud was formed from the dense spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It constantly condensed drops of 5-colored spiritual liquid that sprinkled down like rain. Below the auspicious cloud was a lake that was several dozen miles in radius and was surrounded by towering mountains. Looking down from the sky, this lake was like a mirror. There were many clouds floating above the lake, creating a scene of rosy clouds. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the lake water was faintly 7-colored and contained dense spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Ji Tianxing flew to the air above the lake. He looked around and saw some clues. 5 mountain ranges intersected here, forming a deep valley in the middle. After it was filled with water, it turned into a lake. There are 5 tall mountains around the lake, occupying the positions of the 5 elements and forming a natural 5 elements array. This is where the spiritual energy of the 5 elements gathers and is a natural land of spirit veins. No wonder there is a spirit spring here. The little black dragon is really lucky to be able to find this natural spirit vein and gather the spiritual energy of the 5 elements in a radius of several 100,000 miles to help it cultivate and become stronger. He muttered to himself, a gratified smile appearing on his face. The surrounding mountains were protected by the 5 peaks. The lake water was as calm as a mirror and clouds slowly flowed in the air. There were also 5-colored auspicious clouds in the sky that constantly sprinkled spiritual rain. It was truly a peaceful land of treasures, like a paradise. Ji Tianqing observed for a while before calling out to the calm lake, "Little black dragon, come out and meet me." As his voice fell, the originally calm center of the lake gradually rippled and rippled, spreading out in all directions. In a few short breaths, the lake water in a radius of 10 miles seemed to be boiling as huge waves surged. Then a huge black shadow emerged from the water and broke through the water surface with a splash, flying into the sky. Roar! A resounding and majestic dragon roar resounded, echoing between the mountains. A 10-mile-long black dragon with a cold and majestic aura appeared in the air above the lake. It was the little black dragon. Now not only was its body 10 miles long and majestic to the extreme, the dragon's scales all over its body shone with a dazzling cold light. To ordinary people, this water surface with a radius of dozens of miles could be called a large lake. However, compared to the huge body of the black dragon, this water surface could only be called a pool. Whoosh! The black dragon flew across the sky like lightning and quickly arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. It nodded slightly and said in a low muffled voice, "Old Ji, how did you find this place?" Ji Tianqing stepped onto the dragon's back and sized it up as he said, "I heard from Qianyue that you found a treasured land, so I came to see for myself. I didn't expect your strength to have improved so much in just 2 months." Chapter 15:20. The little black dragon circled above the lake, inhaling and exhaling like a whale sucking in water. It had a leisurely look on its face, and its tone was full of joy. "Old Ji, I talked to Qianyu before and my situation is the same as hers. I don't know why, but ever since we broke through to the spirit refining realm, it's as if we've awakened our bloodlines, gained intelligence and innate gifts. Our cultivation speed has increased by leaps and bounds. Before, we thought that it was the sacred phoenix heart's powerful effects that brought about such changes. But now, I feel that it's not just the sacred phoenix heart's effects. There might be other reasons as well." After listening to the little black dragon's words, Ji Tianqing smiled and explained, "You are not a flood dragon from the East Sea but a true divine dragon. Qianyu has an extraordinary background as well and she is a sky fox. Both of you are divine beasts and your future achievements are limitless. You will definitely reach the deity realm. Only after reaching the spirit refining realm did you awaken your divine beast bloodlines and innate gifts. That is the beginning of your growth. Don't worry too much about this matter. Just focus on your cultivation. When you and Qianyu break through to the primordial spirit realm, we will be able to roam the Shenwu continent unhindered and roam the world." The little black dragon nodded solemnly, and a look of anticipation appeared in its large eyes. "Old Ji, we know that it won't be long before you go and find Yunyao. At that time, you will definitely encounter many dangers and obstacles, so we have been cultivating diligently. We hope that we can help you in the future." Hearing its serious and sincere words, Ji Tianqing's heart warmed slightly and he nodded. "Alright, I also look forward to the two of you becoming stronger as soon as possible and roaming the world with me." He chatted with the little black dragon for a while longer before leaving the 5 elemental spirit lakes. Not long after, he exited the sword world and returned to his private room to continue cultivating. It was late at night and not a sound could be heard. A bright moon hung high in the sky, sprinkling down bright moonlight. At the peak of Godseal Mountain, the 6 palaces that housed the geniuses of the 6 nations were still lit. Within the day-night palace, in a dark room, there were specks of dazzling multicolored light. A young man in a black robe was sitting on a futon made of spiritual jade. This person's figure was tall and straight and his face was like jade. He wore the attire of an elegant young master, and his bearing was rather noble and refined. He was the #1 genius of the White Knight Empire, the seventh son of the White Knight Holy Emperor Song. At this moment he was holding a white communication jade slip with both hands, which was flashing with white light. The jade slip recorded a secret order from the White Knight Holy Emperor. After he finished reading the order with his divine sense, he frowned and began to ponder. After a long time he put the jade slip into his interspatial ring and murmured with a complicated expression, "Ji Tianxing, the sword of burial of heaven. Who would have thought that the world's #1 divine sword would be in his hands?" This person was the #1 genius of the Chuyun Empire. The great emperor of the Chuyun Empire actually did not discover that he possessed the sword of burial of heaven and allowed him to come to the clear sky pagoda. Was this the will of the heavens? It was destined that the sword of burial of heaven would not belong to the Chuyun Empire. After Ji Tianxing came to the clear sky pagoda, he did not use any weapons or magic treasures. It seemed that he intentionally hid the existence of the sword of burial of heaven. If not for the order from my father, I would not have known this secret. The light in his eyes became sharper and sharper. He secretly clenched his fists and murmured to himself, "However, since I know this secret, I must find an opportunity to snatch the sword of burial of heaven. If I can snatch the sword of burial of heaven for my father, I may be able to help my father advance to the martial god realm. At that time, my father will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with martial god Taihao and I will become the new holy emperor." Speaking of this, the corners of his mouth curled up into a faint sneer, and his eyes surged with traces of anticipation. However, he calmly pondered for a moment and the sneer on his lips gradually disappeared. It's a pity that Ji Tianxing seems to be highly regarded and protected by the little princess. He was punished to clean the Divine Book Pavilion for half a year. In this half a year he will probably stay in the Divine Book Pavilion and I will not have a chance to make a move. Could it be that I can only wait until half a year later during the God-Disciple test to make a move? That won't do. I have to think of a way as soon as possible and find a chance to make a move. Thinking of this, he frowned and pondered. Time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, another half a month had passed. In this half a month, Ji Tianxing had been in closed-door cultivation in the Divine Book Pavilion's secret chamber and no one came to disturb him. After half a month of bitter cultivation, his strength steadily advanced towards the 6th level of the Essence Spirit Realm. It was a pity that he still could not fully comprehend the 6th move of the 9 Swords of Burial of Heaven. Early in the morning he ended his closed-door cultivation and walked out of the secret chamber. He walked to the edge of the hall and prepared to find some ancient books to read from a row of bookshelves. At this moment his gaze passed through the wide window and suddenly caught a glimpse of the square below the clear sky pagoda. There was a mighty troop that was walking towards a certain palace. It was an honor guard of about 200 people. There were more than 100 guards dressed in silver armor and more than 100 young and dignified maidservants. The guards had a dignified bearing while the maidservants' clothes fluttered in the wind. They carried all kinds of musical instruments and carried bamboo baskets filled with flowers. In the middle of the honor guard was a golden carriage inlaid with gold and jade. It had an imperial canopy and was surrounded by jeweled curtains. Ji Tianxing looked down at the honor guard from above. He could not see the person in the golden carriage, nor could he guess the identity of the person riding the carriage. But he thought to himself that a person who could put on such a grand display and enter God-Sealing Mountain's summit with such fanfare was likely to have an extraordinary background. Could it be Divine Lord Taihao's divine son or princess? Jiujiu's elder brother or sister? Moments later, the honor guard entered a resplendent palace before he retracted his gaze. Just as he turned his head, he saw the black-robed second guardian standing not far from him. The second protector came without a sound like a ghost. The pair of turbid eyes under the black robe were also staring at the square below the clear sky pagoda, watching the honor guard enter the palace. Ji Tianxing hesitated before asking, "Second guardian, that troop just now, whose honor guard is it?" Second guardian looked out of the window expressionlessly and said in a hoarse and calm voice, "It's the crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, Lu Li. He was once a disciple of the Clear Sky Pagoda. After he achieved great success, he left the Clear Sky Pagoda and returned to the Thousand Snow Empire to be conferred the title of Crown Prince. Every 3 years he will return to the Clear Sky Pagoda to pay his respects to Divine Lord Taihao in the temple. But he will first stay in the Temple of Tranquility for 7 days. After 7 days of cleansing, he will go to the temple to pay his respects. I see. Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. Second guardian showed a gratified expression and continued, Lu Li is very outstanding. He has come to the Divine Book Pavilion countless times, flipping through books without sleep or food. He has also consulted me many times about Taoist scriptures. Chapter 1521. In Ji Tianxing's eyes, the second guardian was a mysterious and unreasonable weird old woman. But when she talked about the crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, Lu Li, her tone and eyes were much gentler, revealing some kindness. Ji Tianxing immediately realized that in the second guardian's eyes, only a diligent and inquisitive young man like Lu Li who focused on reading books, was a genius with both integrity and talent. And someone like him who had been in the Divine Book Pavilion for more than a month and only knew how to read history books and biographies, was a piece of rotten wood that could not be carved. Ji Tianxing was well aware of this point, but he did not bother to argue about it. That crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, Lu Li, had nothing to do with him, so he did not care. After a while, the second guardian slowly walked away. Ji Tianxing also returned to the secret chamber and continued to cultivate. Staying in the Divine Book Pavilion, the days were boring and dull. But he had long been used to it. Instead, he felt very comfortable and at ease, which was more convenient for him to cultivate and comprehend swordsmanship. However, the peaceful days were only 3 days old when they were interrupted. In the evening, Ji Tianxing was cultivating in the secret chamber. Suddenly, the second guardian's deep voice came from outside the door. Ji Tianxing, come out quickly. I have something to tell you. Ji Tianxing was interrupted. He could not help but frown. He got up slowly and walked out of the secret chamber. The second guardian was standing outside the door. Seeing him come out, the second guardian said expressionlessly, for the next few days, you don't have to stay in the Divine Book Pavilion. Go to the Hall of Tranquility and wait for orders. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing was stunned. He frowned and asked, Hall of Tranquility? Isn't that where the crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire lives temporarily? Yes. The second guardian nodded and said indifferently, after you go to the Hall of Tranquility, you must obey orders and serve the crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire. Let me serve Lu Li? Ji Tianxing frowned. He stared at the second guardian and asked, Second guardian, is this your arrangement? Ever since Lu Li's procession of honor arrived at the Mountain of Investiture, he had been staying in the Clear Heaven Pagoda. Now, second guardian suddenly told him to serve Lu Li at the Hall of Tranquility. No matter how one looked at it, it seemed to be the second guardian's decision. After all, she valued Lu Li. However, Ji Tianxing was dissatisfied and secretly thought, not to mention the crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, even the holy emperor of the Thousand Snow Empire is not qualified for me to serve. Are you treating me like a servant? The second protector glanced at him as if he had seen through his thoughts. He explained in a cold tone, I'm just informing you. This is not my intention. This is the decision of the Grand Guardian. I heard that Lu Li is interested in you after hearing about your story. That is why he begged the Grand Guardian to let you go to the Hall of Tranquility. It's the Great Guardian again. This thought flashed through Ji Tianxing's mind. He wondered to himself, this Lu Li, I don't think he is just curious about me. He must have some other purpose. While Lu Li was thinking, the second guardian had turned around and left. He said in a dignified voice, you are now a criminal. Don't even think about disobeying the orders of the Grand Guardian. Otherwise you will be punished even more. Go to the Hall of Tranquility now. If you are smart enough and can make Lu Li happy, maybe he can put in a good word for you in front of the Grand Guardian. With that said, the second guardian disappeared into the darkness and left quietly. Ji Tianxing curled his lips and sneered to himself, he is just a crown prince of an empire. How arrogant he is. I'd like to see what medicine is hidden in this guy's gourd and what he wants to do. Then he left the Divine Book Pavilion and walked out of the Clear Heaven Pagoda. The sky was getting dark. Night was about to fall. The entire peak of the Mountain of Investiture was shrouded in darkness. Many of the palaces were lit with lights. It was very quiet. Only the Hall of Tranquility was not only brightly lit, but there were also more than 200 people living in the palace. The sound of people and music could be heard constantly. Ji Tianxing walked across the square unhurriedly and walked to the gate of the Hall of Tranquility. Besides several golden-armored imperial bodyguards guarding the gate of the palace, there was also a middle-aged man wearing a blue robe and a crown on his head. This person's attire was like a steward of the palace. He also looked like a deacon who was in charge of internal affairs. Seeing Ji Tianxing arrive, the blue-robed man waved at him and said with a kind expression, "May I ask if you are young Master Ji Tianxing?" Ji Tianxing saw that his attitude was somewhat respectful. He couldn't help but be puzzled. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "You are?" The blue-robed man smiled and cupped his hands in greeting, saying, "Greetings, young Master Ji. My surname is Fong. I am Crown Prince Xianxia's supervisor of internal affairs. I followed His Highness to the Mountain of Investiture to manage internal affairs for His Highness." Ji Tianxing nodded at him as a greeting. Supervisor Fong was quite astute. He could see that Ji Tianxing's personality was cold and he didn't want to talk too much. He hurriedly extended his hand and made a gesture of invitation. "Young Master Ji, this is not the place to talk. Please follow me into the palace to see His Highness the Crown Prince." Ji Tianxing glanced at him and didn't say anything. He silently followed behind him and entered the Hall of Tranquility. Not long after, the two of them entered the magnificent guest hall. A handsome young man in an embroidered robe and a golden crown of dragon and phoenix sat on the large jade chair at the head of the table. This person was tall and handsome. His temperament was elegant and he didn't lose his masculinity. He was really a handsome young master of a noble family. He was sitting on the chair and holding an ancient scroll. He was engrossed in reading. There was a thoughtful expression between his eyebrows. Two young and beautiful maids dressed in long thin dresses were nestled by his feet, gently massaging his legs. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing guessed that this person must be the Crown Prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, Lu Li. Sure enough, Supervisor Fong walked in front of Lu Li and bowed. He reported, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, young Master Ji has been invited." Lu Li quickly raised his head and put down the ancient scroll in his hand. He looked at Ji Tianxing with a face full of joy. The two guards were very tactful. After bowing to him, they silently took their leave. Lu Li stood up and walked towards Ji Tianxing. With a smile on his face, he cupped his hands and said, "This must be young Master Ji Tianxing, right? I am Lu Li. I have been looking forward to meeting young Master Ji for a long time." Although Ji Tianxing saw that Lu Li was so polite, he guessed that this person must have other intentions. However, as the saying goes, one doesn't slap a smiling face. Since the other party was so polite, he nodded calmly and greeted him. "Crown Prince Lu is too polite." The two exchanged some pleasantries and sat down. Supervisor Fong brought a cup of spirit tea for Ji Tianxing and silently stood next to Lu Li. Ji Tianxing didn't beat around the bush with Lu Li. He asked directly, "Crown Prince Lu, I don't know you and we have nothing to do with each other." Chapter 1522. Hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Lu Li was stunned. He put on a self-mocking smile and hurried to explain, "Young Master Ji, you misunderstood. You are the #1 genius of the Chuyan Empire. How dare I let you serve me? I just heard about what happened a month ago. I'm very curious about young Master Ji. That is why I asked the Chief Guardian to give an order to invite you to the Hall of Tranquility." Lu Li was the Crown Prince of the Empire of Thousand Snow. Even if he had a noble status, it was only for the people of the Empire of Thousand Snow. Ji Tianxing was the #1 genius of the Chuyan Empire. There was no need to be polite to him. Even if Lu Li had reached the Tribulation Realm, it was nothing. All the candidates who were qualified to enter the Tower of Haotian could reach the Tribulation Realm in the future. Therefore, Lu Li's words were reasonable. Ji Tianxing didn't ask any more questions. He nodded to show that he understood. He knew that Lu Li wouldn't come to him for no reason. Lu Li would tell him his intentions. He didn't need to say anything. He just needed to wait and see. As expected, Lu Li put away his smile and put on a solemn expression. He looked at Ji Tianxing with glowing eyes and said in a low voice, "Young Master Ji, about the matter of worshipping the Immortal Lord, I have understood the cause and effect. I have thought about it for a long time and I have checked many ancient books and documents. I can conclude that it must be a misunderstanding. Most likely, young Master Ji's talent in martial arts is outstanding. Under special circumstances, you caused such a great change in heaven and earth. It is a pity that this is related to the mysteries of heaven and the great Tao. Ordinary people can't understand it. Lu Li's words were obviously meant to please Ji Tianxing, but he expressed it in a subtle way. It wasn't disgusting, and it also showed his profound knowledge and steadiness. If it were an average genius with resentment in his heart, he would feel the same way after hearing Lu Li's words. He might even regard Lu Li as a confidant. However, the person Lu Li met was Ji Tianxing, a very special guy. He glanced at Lu Li and said with a faint smile, "So, Prince Lu also thinks that the chief guardian is ignorant and doesn't understand the mysteries of heaven?" Lu Li's expression changed. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Young Master Ji, you misunderstood again. I didn't mean that." On God Bestowment Mountain, he actually dared to speak ill of the Great Protector. Wasn't that courting death? Ji Tianxing had no scruples. He stared at him playfully and asked, "What do you mean?" Lu Li also felt that Ji Tianxing was not easy to deal with. He frowned. He pondered for a moment before continuing, "What I mean is, young Master Ji, as the #1 genius of the Chuyun Empire with outstanding talent, you should have limitless glory. However, a misunderstanding caused his reputation to be tarnished, and he was even punished to clean the Divine Book Pavilion. It was truly a pity. The candidates of the God's disciple from different countries were called young geniuses, but they did not have the corresponding foresight and insight. They even gloated and laughed at Ji Hao behind his back. When this monarch found out about this matter, his heart was also quite unhappy. "I feel that young Master Ji is not worth it." His words could not only provoke Ji Tianxing's anger, but also let Ji Tianxing have a sense of approval. It could be said that he had won the hearts of the people. However, Ji Tianxing still looked calm and indifferent. He slowly drank his tea and said, "I am an eagle that soars to the 9 heavens. Why would I care about the criticism of a sparrow?" Lu Li's body trembled. A strange light flashed through his eyes. He sneered in his heart, "What an arrogant kid. He really has no sense of shame." However, on the surface he put on a look of admiration and said sympathetically, "Young Master Ji, you are wise. You are absolutely right. This is the state of mind of a peerless genius." Then, as an experienced person, he took the initiative to introduce the situation of God Bestowment Mountain to Ji Tianxing, as well as the God's Disciple examination and cultivation. After all, he had cultivated at God Bestowment Mountain for more than 100 years. He only left God Bestowment Mountain to return to the Thousand Snow Empire after he reached the 3rd level of the Tribulation Realm. Ji Tianxing listened in silence. He learned many secrets from Lu Li and had a deeper understanding of God's disciples and the Haotian Pagoda. Unknowingly, 2 hours had passed. Most of the time it was Lu Li who was talking and Ji Tianxing who was listening. However, on the surface the conversation between the two seemed to be pleasant and harmonious. Lu Li saw that the time was right. He confided in Ji Tianxing and told him his true intentions. "Young Master Ji, I believe you also understand that God Bestowment Mountain is just a holy land for martial arts. It is a place for God's disciples to communicate and cultivate. Most of the God's disciples will leave God Bestowment Mountain in the future and find their own way out. Only a few of the top God's disciples may be favored by the God and promoted to the God's kingdom in the 9 heavens. They will be given a more honorable status. However, only 1 or 2 of these lucky ones will appear in hundreds of years. The chances are very slim. I am afraid that your current situation is not good. Not only will it be difficult for you to be valued, but you may also be ostracized and oppressed. Young Master Ji, with your talent in martial arts, you don't have to be bullied like this. You are not someone with your temperament and temperament." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing knew that Lu Li was going to get to the point. He looked at Lu Li calmly, raised his eyebrows and asked, "What do you mean?" Lu Li said solemnly, "Like my father, I value talents the most. I don't want pearls to be covered in dust. Therefore, every few years, I will come to God Bestowment Mountain to pay my respects. I want to help some unaccomplished talents and let them regain their glory. In the future, I will inherit the position of the Holy Emperor of Thousand Snow. I must have talents that I can trust and put in important positions. Young Master Ji, to be honest, I feel like you are an old friend at first sight. I admire you." With great sincerity, I invite you to join the Empire of Thousand Snow. As long as you agree, we will call each other brothers. I will definitely treat you as my most trusted brother. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows. He didn't say anything, but he was laughing in his heart. So this guy wants to rope me in. He has other plans. Seeing that Ji Tianqing didn't say anything, Lu Li thought that Ji Tianqing was hesitating. Lu Li continued, "Young Master Ji, as long as you are willing to follow me, I will not treat you badly. I will give you the best treatment and cultivation resources. I will make you the most dazzling, powerful warrior of the Empire of Thousand Snow." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "Speaking of which, I remember. The #1 genius of the Empire of Thousand Snow, Xianxia, is more talented and powerful than me. Prince Lu, why don't you try your best to cultivate her? Why are you wasting time on me?" Speaking of Jiang Ningxue, Lu Li was stunned for a moment. Then he put on a playful smile. "Oh, young Master Ji, you have noticed Jiang Ningxue for a long time? What do you think of Jiang Ningxue?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "She's beautiful, gentle, and talented in martial arts. Of course, she's a 1 in a million beauty." Chapter 1523. Ji Tianqing didn't expect Lu Li to suddenly say this. An idea popped up in his mind. A honey trap? Looks like this guy is plotting something big. With this thought, he looked at Lu Li calmly and shook his head. "Crown Prince Lu, Jiang Ningxue is a rare beauty, but love is a matter of mutual consent. Besides, I already have a wife. I only want to tie her down. I won't fall in love with anyone else." Lu Li seemed to have expected this answer. He waved his hand with a smile and said, "Young Master Ji, you are wrong. Which man doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? Even the wealthy families in the mortal world have groups of wives and concubines. A proud son of the heavens like you should have countless beauties to match your talent and reputation. As for Jiang Ningxue, you can rest assured. With me as the matchmaker, Jiang Ningxue won't dare to disobey. Besides, young Master Ji is so handsome and talented. Many girls have fallen in love with you. Maybe Jiang Ningxue has some feelings for you?" Ji Tianqing just smiled and didn't say anything. Seeing this, Lu Li continued to persuade, "Young Master Ji, even if you already have a wife, Jiang Ningxue can be your concubine. As long as you nod, I will immediately summon Jiang Ningxue to see you and create an opportunity for you two. You two are a perfect match. You are both extraordinary geniuses. If you two can become Taoist companions, it will be a good story." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said seriously, "I appreciate Crown Prince Lu's kindness, but I have made up my mind. There is no need to mention this again." Seeing that he refused firmly, Lu Li didn't feel embarrassed. He nodded with a smile and said, "In that case, let nature take its course. I think highly of you, so I am a bit impatient." Ji Tianqing stood up, cupped his hands and said, "Crown Prince Lu, it is late. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave." Lu Li nodded and said, "All right, let's stop here for tonight. Young Master Ji, go and rest. I have already asked Steward Fong to arrange a place for you to stay. For the next few days, young Master Ji will stay in this shrine of peace. 4 days later, I would like to invite young Master Ji to follow me to the Divine Hall to pay respects to Divine Lord Taihao." Ji Tianqing was stunned. He frowned at him and asked, "Crown Prince Lu, is this your decision? Or is it the Great Guardian's idea?" Lu Li smiled and explained, "Of course, it is my idea. I know that the previous matter was a misunderstanding which led to young Master Ji being punished. This monarch has thought about it for a long time before making this decision. I implore the Great Protector to give you another chance. For my sake, the Great Protector agreed to this matter and allowed you to follow me to the temple to pay your respects again. As long as young Master Ji sincerely repents in the Divine Hall, the misunderstanding from before can be resolved and the awkwardness between you and the Great Guardian can be alleviated." With that said, Lu Li put on a confident smile and stared at Ji Tianqing. He thought to himself, Ji Tianqing is now a criminal. Not only did he offend the Great Protector, but he is also mocked by the young geniuses of various countries. He is a proud and arrogant person. How can he endure such humiliation? He must have a belly full of resentment in his heart that cannot be resolved. I will plead with the Great Protector for him and give him a chance to turn over a new leaf. This will give him a way out. As long as he is not an idiot, he will seize this opportunity and he will be grateful to me. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows. After a moment of consideration, he nodded and said, "Since Crown Prince Lu has good intentions, I will accept deferentially. After all, the Great Protector has transferred me to the Shrine of Peace and I cannot disobey. I can only stay here and follow Crown Prince Lu's arrangements." Lu Li was delighted to see that Ji Tianxing had agreed. He nodded and said, "If so, then it is settled. Steward Fong, take young Master Ji to rest. You must instruct the servants to take good care of young Master Ji and not neglect him." Steward Fong bowed and accepted the order. He took Ji Tianxing out of the living room and walked towards the depths of the palace. After Steward Fong left with Ji Tianxing, Lu Li was still standing in the living room, looking at the curtain of night outside the door. His eyes were filled with shrewdness and a faint sneer hung on the corner of his mouth. He murmured to himself, this damn Ji Tianxing is really a cunning and difficult person to deal with. No wonder Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun failed in their mission and failed to get the Sword of the Burial of Heaven. They were even seriously injured by Ji Tianxing. This guy is not only powerful but also scheming. He is really not easy to deal with. However, I have come out personally and used the opportunity of paying respects to him. I have a good chance of winning. Now that he has accepted my goodwill, the first step of my plan has been completed. In the next few days I will strike while the iron is hot. I will definitely succeed in getting the Sword of the Burial of Heaven. Speaking of this, Lu Li put on a sneer and squinted his eyes. He walked out of the reception hall and entered the heavily guarded study. About 7 minutes later, Steward Fong came back and reported to Lu Li in the study. "Your Highness, I have made proper arrangements for Ji Tianxing. He has settled down and is resting." Lu Li nodded with satisfaction. He ordered Steward Fong, "Summon Jiang Ningxue to the study. I have something important to tell her." Steward Fong said yes and hurried out of the study to carry out the order. Lu Li sat in front of the spacious study table, sipping a cup of mystical tea. When he finished the cup of mystical tea, Steward Fong also brought Jiang Ningxue to the study. General Manager Fong tactfully retreated and closed the door. Only Lu Li and Jiang Ningxue were left in the study. Lu Li sat on the jade chair with a jade teacup in his hand. He turned around and looked at Jiang Ningxue. Jiang Ningxue was wearing a white dress. She stood in the study with elegance and dignity, looking straight into Lu Li's eyes. Her pair of eyes that were as clear as autumn water contained a faint trace of affection, as well as a bit of joy. "Lu Li, didn't you tell me to cultivate in the Tower of Haotian and come to see me in 2 years? I have only been away for 2 months and you have come to the Mount of Canonization?" Needless to say, Jiang Ningxue and Lu Li had known each other for a long time and their relationship was not simple. Lu Li nodded calmly. Pointing to the chair in front of him, he said in a low voice, "Shuer, it is a long story. Come and sit down." Jiang Ningxue said yes. She walked over to the study table and sat down with dignity. Lu Li looked at her solemnly. After a sigh he said, "Shuer, I will not hide it from you. I am here at the Mount of Canonization because of my father's order." "Saint Emperor's order?" Jiang Ningxue was surprised. Seeing his serious expression, she asked with concern, "Lu Li, what is it? Why are you so worried?" Chapter 1524. The Sword of Burial of Heaven? Jiang Ningxue's body trembled. Her eyes were filled with shock. "Are you talking about Kenshin's sword, the legendary #1 sword in the world?" "Yes." Lu Li nodded solemnly. Jiang Ningxue's pretty face was filled with disbelief. More than 1,000 years ago, Kenshin defeated all the heroes in the world with the Sword of Burial of Heaven. He even suppressed the 3 martial gods. Everyone knows about this. Of course, I have heard of Kenshin and the #1 sword. However, after Kenshin died, didn't the Sword of Burial of Heaven disappear without a trace? Lu Li nodded and explained, 8,000 years ago the Sword of Burial of Heaven did disappear with Kenshin's death. However, the Sword of Burial of Heaven has reappeared in the world today. A lucky guy got the sword and came to the Clear Heaven Pagoda. That lucky guy is the #1 genius of the Outcloud Empire, Ji Tianxing. What? Jiang Ningxue was even more surprised. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. That cold and arrogant guy in a white robe? He offended the dignity of the Divine Master during the worship ceremony, causing great changes in heaven and earth. The Divine Master was furious. Before she could finish, Luli shook his head and said, "No one knows the exact reason for that matter. However, I think it has something to do with the sort of burial of heaven. If not, how could that guy cause such a great change in heaven and earth with his strength and talent? As for the Divine Master being furious and causing great changes in heaven and earth and being struck by lightning, that's even more nonsense." Jiang Ningxue frowned and thought for a moment before she nodded and said, "I see. That's incredible. Luli, the Divine Emperor sent you to Mount God's ceiling for the sort of burial of heaven?" "That's right." Luli nodded again and explained, "Saint Emperor received the news more than a month ago. He sent Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun of the Martial League to hide at the foot of the Mount of Gods, waiting for an opportunity to assassinate Ji Tianxing and snatch the sword of the burial of heaven. Unfortunately, their operation failed and they were seriously injured by Ji Tianxing. They fled back to the Empire in a sorry state." Jiang Ningxue was shocked once again. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? Those two were crossing Calamity Realm experts. How could they be injured by Ji Tianxing? I've seen Ji Tianxing before. He's clearly only at the 5th Firmament Essence Soul Realm. Could it be that the might of the burial of heaven sword injured Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun? Exactly. Luli nodded slightly and said solemnly, "The burial of heaven is the #1 sword in the world. Its might is unparalleled. Anyone who can obtain it can find Kenshin's tomb and obtain Kenshin's supreme techniques and inheritance. Not only can they become an God of War expert, they can even break through the shackles of heaven and earth and ascend to the upper world. Therefore, the Divine Emperor gave a death order to obtain the sword of the burial of heaven at all costs. For this we can pay any price." Jiang Ningxue looked at him deeply and nodded. "Luli, I know you have great ambitions. I also believe that you will become an unparalleled expert. Since you have the Divine Emperor's order, I will do my best to help you achieve your wish." Luli was touched. He reached out to hold her white and tender hands, nodded and said, "Shuer, I know how you feel about me. If I can achieve my wish and successfully obtain the sword of the burial of heaven, I can help Father break through to the God of War realm and become the 4th God of War in the world. In the future I will also become the new Divine Emperor. By then I will not let you down." Jiang Ningxue's glamorous face blushed slightly. Her eyes flickered with a hint of gratitude. Her bashful and timid look was even more beautiful than before, and it was enough to make one's heart drunk. But soon she calmed down and asked Luli, "So what is your plan? How can I help you?" Luli returned to his normal state. He said seriously, "So far there are also people from the Empire of White Knight who know the news. They sent out 2 envoys to assassinate Ji Tianxing under the pretext of presenting the books as a tribute. Even though their plan failed, I believe that people from the Empire of White Knight will not give up. They will think of other ways. Therefore we must make it quick and get the sword of the burial of heaven as soon as possible in case of any undue delay. I have begged the Chief Guardian to transfer Ji Tianxing to the Hall of Tranquility. He is currently living in the hall. When the news spreads out, all the geniuses from different countries will understand that I am trying to win over Ji Tianxing and Ji Tianxing will accept it. This will not only drive a wedge between Ji Tianxing and the Empire of Chuyun, but also make it easier for me to carry out my plan." Jiang Ningxue nodded and said, "During the worship ceremony, I have secretly observed that the geniuses of the Empire of Chuyun are not friendly to Ji Tianxing. Apart from a guy called Endless Void who is friends with Ji Tianxing, the others seem to be hostile to him. Now that Ji Tianxing has come to the Hall of Tranquility, people from the Empire of Chuyun will definitely work together to deal with him." Luli nodded with a smile and continued, "Driving a wedge between him and the Empire of Chuyun is only the first step of the plan. The second step is to get close to Ji Tianxing and find out where the sword of the burial of heaven is hidden. Shuer, I need your help on this matter. Ji Tianxing has a good impression of you. He seems to like you. I will arrange for you to stay with him so that you can get closer to him." "What?" Jiang Ningxue was stunned. She stared at Luli with her eyes wide open in disbelief. Her pretty face turned pale. Her eyes were filled with shock and disappointment. She could not believe that the crown prince who was graceful and gentle as jade in her mind would say something like this. "Luli, you know that my heart belongs only to you. You want to send me to another man in order to complete the mission of the Holy Emperor? How can you do this? Jiang Ningxue's heart was filled with shame and disappointment. Her body was trembling. She stared at Lu Li as if she was trying to see through him. Lu Li did not feel embarrassed. He held her soft hands and explained in a gentle tone, "Swear, of course I don't have the heart to hurt you, let alone give you away. But I am doing this for the sake of the big picture. Moreover, I've already tested Ji Tianxing. Although he's a cunning and scheming person, I've already tested him. But he is not a wretched and obscene person. He is a decent gentleman. He will not be rude to you. Swear, for the sake of me and the future of the Empire of Thousand Snow, please bear with it for the time being." Lu Li looked at Jiang Ningxue with sincerity. His tone was sincere as well. Jiang Ningxue looked at him in silence. Her eyes kept changing. Many complicated thoughts flashed through her mind. After a long while she put on a bitter sneer, nodded and said, "You are the man I love. You are the son of the Holy Emperor. Fine, I'll agree to your request." Chapter 1525. Early the next morning the sun had just risen. Ji Tianxing changed into a white robe with patterns of stars and clouds and a jade crown with the help of maids. After washing his face and rinsing his mouth, he walked out of the room and stood under the eaves of the door, observing the situation in the house. This was a yard in the depth of the palace. It was built in a magnificent manner and the environment was quiet and elegant. There were guards on all the roads and gates. There were more than a dozen young and beautiful maids in the hall. Lu Li is so sincere. Keeping me in the Hall of Tranquility is just the first step. He must have other plans and means. Ji Tianxing thought to himself. A glint of coldness rose in his eyes. Right at that moment, a crisp and pleasant voice of a lady came from next to him. "Young Master Ji, how come you are in the mood to watch the sun rise so early in the morning?" Hearing the voice, Ji Tianxing turned to the right. He saw a slim and graceful figure in a white dress standing under the eaves of the corridor. It was a young lady of about 20 years old. She was pure and beautiful. Her eyebrows were like mountains and her eyes were as clear as water. She was wearing a simple but elegant white dress and a pair of hairpins. She was dignified and graceful. She was a rare beauty. Ji Tianxing recognized her at once. She was the #1 genius of the Empire of Thousand Snow, Jiang Ningxue. Ji Tianxing was surprised. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Jiang Ningxue? What are you doing here?" Jiang Ningxue put on a gentle smile. She walked to him and said in a gentle voice, "Young Master Ji, have you forgotten? I am a citizen of the Empire of Thousand Snow. Now that the Crown Prince has come to the Mount of Gods to pay his respects, I must come to pay my respects to him. Before the Crown Prince leaves the Mount of Gods, I will stay in the Hall of Tranquility for a few days. Coincidentally, my room is right next to young Master Ji's. Perhaps this is fate?" "Fate?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "Maybe." He thought to himself, only a fool would believe this is fate. Last night Lu Li said he wanted to set me up with Jiang Ningxue. This morning Jiang Ningxue showed up in the room next to mine. How could Lu Li be so obvious? Jiang Ningxue noticed that he seemed to be lost in thought, so she took the initiative to say, "Young Master Ji, this is the first time we've come to Mount God Bestowment. We haven't walked around since we arrived. If young Master Ji doesn't mind, would young Master Ji accompany me for a stroll around the palace and enjoy the scenery?" As if she was afraid that Ji Tianxing would misunderstand, she added, "Early on during the worship ceremony, I paid close attention to you and was curious about you. Now that I finally have the opportunity to come into contact with you, it is my honor to be able to talk to you face to face. How can I refuse a beauty's invitation? Wouldn't it spoil the scenery?" Ji Tianxing nodded calmly and agreed to her request. Thus the two of them walked side by side, casually strolling around the palace, chatting as they walked. Jiang Ningxue's appearance and temperament were outstanding. She also had a faint natural fragrance. Her breath smelled like orchids when she spoke. She and Ji Tianxing were close to each other, as if they were a couple who had fallen in love with each other. Her faint fragrance kept teasing Ji Tianxing's heart. If he were an ordinary young man, he would have been tempted by her. Even if he didn't take advantage of her, he would keep glancing at her curvaceous and graceful figure. However, Ji Tianxing remained calm and his eyes were clear. There was not a trace of distracting thoughts in his mind. Soon 2 hours passed. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Ningxue walked around the Temple of Tranquility. They admired the 2 gardens and the crystal lake before returning to their residence. Ji Tianxing found some clues after spending 2 hours with her. While he was thinking, Jiang Ningxue also remained silent. She seemed to be absent-minded, as if she had something on her mind. Based on Jiang Ningxue's expressions, reactions and some of her actions, Lu Li could tell that Jiang Ningxue was trying to please him, but in fact she was resisting him. He immediately understood that Jiang Ningxue didn't want to please him, but she had to compromise because of Lu Li's order. Also, Jiang Ningxue was a dignified and graceful lady, unlike Lu Li, who was cunning and couldn't hide his thoughts and secrets. Understanding this, Ji Tianxing decided to find a chance to test Jiang Ningxue further. The 2 of them returned to their residence and sat down to rest under a 1,000-year-old pine. The maids had already placed all kinds of fruits, pastries and tea on the stone table under the tree for them to enjoy. Jiang Ningxue sat in a dignified posture, holding a teacup and drinking tea. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly he had an idea. He looked at Jiang Ningxue and said with a smile, "Lady Jiang, among the geniuses of the 6 states, you are one of the top 3. I admire you very much. Recently, when I was cultivating my swordsmanship, I encountered some bottlenecks and questions that I couldn't solve. Lady Jiang, please help me to see what is wrong with my swordsmanship and how I can break through the bottleneck." With that said, he took out a black sword from his interspatial ring before waiting for Jiang Ningxue's answer or not. This 1-meter-long black sword had an exquisite and gorgeous design. A lifelike black dragon was coiled around the hilt. The sword was emitting a sharp coldness. Clearly it was a rare relic weapon in the world. After all, this was the black dragon sword that the little black dragon had transformed into. Ji Tianxing had just communicated with the little black dragon with his spiritual power and confirmed his plan. Holding the black dragon sword, he stood up and walked to the center of the yard, ready to display his swordsmanship. Jiang Ningxue, who had been absent-minded, suddenly saw the black dragon sword in his hand. She was refreshed and her eyes glowed. She tried her best to suppress the excitement in her heart. She pretended to be calm as she looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, "Young Master Ji, the sword in your hand is no ordinary item. It must be a peerless relic, right?" Jiang Ningxue's reaction made Ji Tianxing laugh inwardly. He was even more certain of his guess. He nodded at Jiang Ningxue and said with a proud expression, "Of course. If you want to become an expert in the way of the sword, you must have an extraordinary sword. And this sword in my hand is a divine weapon that is 1 in a million." Jiang Ningxue saw his proud expression and became even more anxious. She stared at the black dragon sword, almost unable to move her eyes away. "Young Master Ji, since this sword is so extraordinary, it must have a famous name, right?" Hearing this question, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned. He nodded with a strange expression and said, "Of course it has a name, but it's not famous. It's a little strange. This sword is called Burial of Heaven. This name is a little thick." When he said this, the voice of the Burial of Heaven suddenly sounded in his mind. It said with some displeasure, "Even if you want to put on an act, don't slander me, all right?" Ji Tianxing hurriedly transmitted his voice to persuade it. "Burial of Heaven. You just need to sleep and recuperate. Don't worry about these trivial matters." Chapter 1526. When Jiang Ningxue heard the words Burial of Heaven, her eyes lit up and her heart skipped a beat. Fortunately, she was calm and smart enough to not show any abnormalities on her face. Her expression was as calm as ever. However, Ji Tianxing was testing her on purpose. He had been observing the changes in her expression the whole time. Of course, he could tell that her emotions were surging and she was quite excited. Jiang Ningxue pretended to be confused and thought for a moment, then said, "Burial of Heaven? This name is a little strange, but it's very domineering. Young Master Ji, can you let me take a look at your Burial of Heaven?" On the surface, it seemed that she had never heard of the Burial of Heaven and was just curious. Ji Tianxing did not hesitate and handed the sword to her without hesitation. She quickly took it and held the black dragon sword with both hands. Her eyes were bright as she carefully observed it. She could tell that this sword was not only exquisite, but also contained a sense of antiquity. Especially the black dragon on the hilt. It was very lifelike, as if it was about to come to life. Most importantly, this sword was not an ordinary magic weapon. It was not a lifeless object. It actually had a soul and divine energy. It was like a sleeping divine dragon that could come to life at any time to tear the sky apart and soar through the 9 heavens. This feeling made Jiang Ningxue very certain that this was an extraordinary divine sword. It was very similar to the legendary Burial of Heaven. After a while, Jiang Ningxue was still holding the black dragon sword. She turned it over and over again, admiring it very much. Ji Tianxing saw that she was looking at it for a long time without saying anything, and had no intention of returning it. He asked, "Miss Jiang, what's wrong?" Jiang Ningxue finally came back to her senses. She smiled awkwardly and explained, "Young Master Ji's Burial of Heaven is indeed a peerless divine weapon. In all my life I have never seen such a spiritual and extraordinary divine sword. I was so shocked that I lost my composure for a moment. I have made a fool of myself in front of young Master Ji." Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. He said in a playful tone, "Since Miss Jiang likes this divine sword so much, I will reluctantly part with it and give it to you. What do you think?" Jiang Ningxue's body trembled. Her face was filled with joy as she stared at Ji Tianxing with sparkling eyes. She asked, "Young Master Ji, are you really willing to give me such a godly sword?" Ji Tianxing's smile became more and more playful. He nodded and said, "Of course I'm willing to part with a beauty like Miss Jiang, but I have a condition." Jiang Ningxue was too focused on obtaining the Sword of Burial of Heaven to notice the teasing look in his eyes. She quickly asked, "What are your conditions, Mr. Ji? There's no harm in speaking." "Really?" Ji Tianxing looked at her with a smile and walked to her side. He leaned over and whispered in her ear. Hearing his conditions, Jiang Ningxue's delicate body trembled. Her body froze on the spot. When she came back to her senses, her face was red with embarrassment. Even her fair neck was covered in a layer of red. Her body was also trembling. She lowered her head, not daring to look Ji Tianxing in the eyes. She stood up with a flustered expression and quickly returned the Sword of Burial of Heaven to Ji Tianxing. She then turned around and left in embarrassment and anger. Ji Tianxing looked at her back as she left in a hurry. The smile on his face became more and more playful. He asked in a loud voice, "Miss Jiang, do you agree or not? If you've made up your mind, come to my room tonight. We'll have a good talk again." Jiang Ningxue staggered and almost crashed into a pillar. The maids and guards around the courtyard all looked at her strangely when they heard Ji Tianxing's voice. She was instantly overwhelmed with shame and anger. She quickened her steps and ran through the corridor, leaving the courtyard as if she was escaping. After she left, Ji Tianxing put away the evil smile on his face, and his eyes regained their clarity and calmness. Since you are not a treacherous and fickle woman, why did you try to test me for Lu Li? I only tested you a little bit and you showed your true colors. Lu Li's honey trap seems to have collapsed by itself." Ji Tianxing put on a smile. After he went back to his room, he thought of another key issue. "When I went to the foot of the mountain to receive tributes, 2 envoys of the White Knight Empire attacked me first. I injured them and they ran away. Then 2 masked men in black showed up. They also wanted to take the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Not long after that, Lu Li came to the Mount of Gods to pay his respects. He even asked the chief guardian to transfer me to the Hall of Tranquility. Lu Li tried his best to win me over. He even resorted to honey traps to let Jiang Ningxue get close to me to show his goodwill. Lu Li must be after the Heaven's Burial sword since he was willing to pay so much for it. Are the 2 masked men in black from the Empire of Thousand Snow?" Previously he had been wondering if the 2 groups of men who attacked him were from the Empire of White Knight. Now that Lu Li was trying so hard to please him, he understood that the second group of men in black might be from the Empire of Thousand Snow. On this thought, Ji Tianxing told himself that no matter what Lu Li was up to, he must be careful. It was late at night again. In a study room in the Hall of Tranquility, Lu Li was sitting in front of a desk. Jiang Ningxue in a white dress was sitting in front of him. She was reporting to him calmly. "Lu Li, today I approached Ji Tianxing on my own initiative. I spent half a day with him and I have found some clues." Hearing this, Lu Li was delighted. He asked at once, Shuer, what did you find? Jiang Ningxue said with relief. I have gained his trust. Recently he has reached a bottleneck in his cultivation of swordsmanship. He wanted to practice swordsmanship and asked me to give him some guidance. He took out a black sword called the Burial of Heaven. I have observed it carefully. There should be no mistake. Lu Li's eyes glowed. He became excited and eager. Are you sure that is the Burial of Heaven? That's great. As the saying goes, even heroes fall for the charms of beautiful women. Seems that the beauty trap is the most effective. Shuer, since Ji Tianqing is willing to show you the Burial of Heaven, it means that he has a good impression of you and trusts you. You must strike while the iron is hot and find a way to get the Burial of Heaven. Speaking of this, Jiang Ningxue's expression became weird. She said with resentment, that guy said that he is willing to give me the Burial of Heaven, but he has a condition. What condition? Lu Li asked in a hurry. Did you agree? Jiang Ningxue's face was cold. A glint of coldness flashed through her eyes. She said angrily, that damn lecher, he wants me to sleep with him for one night. Lu Li's expressions froze. He frowned with displeasure. But he thought to himself, damn that punk. He pretends to be a gentleman but he is such a pervert. Chapter 1527. Lu Li knew that Jiang Ningxue was deeply in love with him. Given Jiang Ningxue's status, family background, looks and talents, she was the best choice for him. However, compared to the best sword in the world, Jiang Ningxue was not so important. In his mind, how could a beautiful woman be more important than his future in martial arts? Jiang Ningxue saw that he was silent, as if he was considering something. She immediately became anxious, and the anger on her face became even more apparent. Lu Li, what are you thinking? Do you want me to agree to his rude terms? Jiang Ningxue thought that Lu Li would be as angry as she was and refuse the terms. However, Lu Li's reaction was as if he was weighing the pros and cons, considering whether to say yes or not. This made Jiang Ningxue feel even more indignant and disappointed. Her clear eyes were gradually covered with a layer of mist. Lu Li came back to his senses. He glanced at her and thought to himself, the Burial of Heaven is the best sword in the world. Ji Tianqing is neither a fool nor a lecher. How can he give away the Burial of Heaven so easily? Is he plotting something? Or does he not understand the value and significance of the Burial of Heaven? Lu Li looked at Jiang Ningxue and comforted her. Shuer, don't worry. There are still many suspicious points. The black sword that Ji Tianqing took out, he said it was the sword of the Burial of Heaven. Tell me, what is that sword like? Jiang Ningxue paused for a moment and thought of a possibility. She answered honestly, that sword is 1 meter long and 2 inches wide. It is pitch black and cold. There is a lifelike black dragon carved on the hilt. I have examined the sword carefully. It has a soul and strong fluctuation of divine energy. It is not an ordinary sword. After Lu Li heard this, he frowned. That sword is intact? There is a black dragon carved on the hilt? Yes. Jiang Ningxue nodded. Lu Li's expression changed. A cold glare flashed across his eyes. Shuer, you have been fooled by Ji Tianqing. That is not the sword of Burial of Heaven. The real sword of Burial of Heaven had been severely damaged when Kenshin fell, and was now incomplete. With Ji Tianqing's strength, it was impossible for him to completely repair the sword of Burial of Heaven. Furthermore, the hilt of the Burial of Heaven doesn't have a black dragon engraved on it. Jiang Ningxue was trembling with anger. Her face turned pale as she felt even more ashamed and furious. Damned lecher, you despicable bastard. He actually used a fake sword to impersonate the sword of the Burial of Heaven and tried to cheat me of my innocence? Lu Li waved his hand and comforted her. Shuer, don't be so angry. It hasn't happened yet. Jiang Ningxue finally suppressed her hatred and anger. She frowned and asked, if that is not the sword of the Burial of Heaven, why would Ji Tianqing use a fake sword to trick me? Coldness surged in Lu Li's eyes as he said coldly, clearly Ji Tianqing has become suspicious. He deliberately used a fake sword to impersonate the sword of the Burial of Heaven to test your reaction. Judging from all the signs, that guy is not simple. He must know the value and significance of the sword of the Burial of Heaven. He has become suspicious of our motives. Jiang Ningxue appeared to be worried. She asked, then what should we do? Should I continue to get close to him? Luli thought about it and said calmly, "Of course, you have to stay in the Hall of Tranquility and continue to live next door to him. But you don't have to take the initiative to get close to him. Just let nature take its course. Even though he has become suspicious and we cannot get the Sword of the Burial of Heaven for now, I still have a follow-up plan. I will take this opportunity to drive a wedge between him and the Empire of Chu Yun. I will try my best to rope him into the Empire of Thousand Snow. If my plan works and he can leave the Mount of Gods, then his life will no longer be in his hands. The Sword of the Burial of Heaven will be mine." Hearing this, Jiang Ningxue understood what he meant. Luli could not take the Sword of the Burial of Heaven by force on the Mount of Gods. Once Ji Tianxing left the Mount of Gods, Luli would not have to hide anymore. He could do whatever he wanted. Then the two discussed some more matters and decided on their next plan. After about 7 minutes, Jiang Ningxue said goodbye to Luli and left the study. 3 days passed before they knew it. During the 3 days, Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in the yard of the Hall of Tranquility. Just as he expected, Jiang Ningxue still lived in the room next to his, but she never came to see him again. Sometimes when they saw each other, Jiang Ningxue would turn around and leave with a cold face. Anger could be seen between her eyebrows. Ji Tianxing was not surprised by this outcome at all. After all, Jiang Ningxue was a beauty with both talent and beauty. She was not a scheming beauty. Of course, she would not throw herself at Luli for a sword. Geniuses had their dignity and pride. However, compared to the quietness of the Hall of Tranquility, the palace where the geniuses of the 6 states lived was bustling with noise and excitement. It was unknown who spread the news, but it spread among the geniuses of the 6 nations. Now everyone knew that Ji Tianxing had turned to Luli, the crown prince of the Empire of Thousand Snow. He was living in the Hall of Tranquility. Luli was once a disciple of a god and was highly regarded by the 2 guardians and several envoys. Every few years, Luli would go back to the Mount of Gods to pay his respects. He respected his teacher and was very sincere to the Immortal Master. The geniuses of the various states were talking about how Ji Tianxing could be appreciated and valued by Luli. It was like a silver lining at the end of the tunnel. Even if he could not become a disciple of a god in the future, he could be cultivated by Luli and he could do well in the Empire of Thousand Snow. More than a dozen geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire were angry and contemptuous about Ji Tianxing turning to Luli. As far as they were concerned, Ji Tianxing was the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. He had disgraced himself by ruining the worship ceremony. Now he had turned to the crown prince of the Empire of Thousand Snow. How shameless! He had disgraced the Chu Yun Empire. If it were not for the fact that it was inconvenient for them to go to the Hall of Tranquility, they would have reprimanded Ji Tianxing in person. Apart from this, some insiders said that Luli had begged the chief guardian to give Ji Tianxing another chance. When the 7 days were up, Luli would bring Ji Tianxing with him when he went to the temple to pay his respects. As long as Ji Tianxing bowed to the temple devoutly and repented sincerely, the anger of the chief guardian could be appeased. By that time, Luli could put in a good word for Ji Tianxing to the chief guardian. Maybe he could be exempted from punishment. When the geniuses of various states learned about this, they were all criticizing secretly. They were waiting for Luli to go to the temple to pay his respects so that they could see Luli and Ji Tianxing with their own eyes. Soon the 7 days were up. Today was the day Luli would go to the temple to pay his respects. Early in the morning, the maids and guards in the Hall of Tranquility were busy. There was a hubbub of voices. Chapter 1528. In the Hall of Tranquility. In the spacious yard, more than 40 guards and maids were lined up in neat rows, looking solemn and dignified. They were all elites selected from the honor guard, qualified to accompany Luli to the temple to worship the Immortal Lord. In addition, Jiang Ningxue and several geniuses of the Thousand Snow Empire were standing in front of the team. Everyone stood in the yard waiting quietly. Luli was not present. At the moment he was leading Chief Steward Fong to the yard where Ji Tianxing lived. Arriving at the yard, Luli stood under the ancient pine in the yard and waited. Chief Steward Fong walked to Ji Tianxing's room and shouted respectfully, "Young Master Ji, the time is up. You should go to the temple with the crown prince." The door was still closed. Ji Tianxing's voice came from inside. Crown Prince Lu is going to worship the Immortal Lord. As a sinner, I will not join in the fun in case there is another disturbance. Hearing this, both Chief Steward Fong and Lu Li frowned. Lu Li waved his hand to signal Chief Steward Fong to leave. He said in person, "Young Master Ji, what do you mean? Didn't we agree on this before? Now that the time is up, you don't want to go. Are you trying to embarrass me on purpose?" As soon as he finished speaking, the door creaked open. Ji Tianxing stepped out and looked at Lu Li with a playful smile. He explained, "Crown Prince Lu, you have misunderstood. Since I have promised you, I will not go back on my words. I am just reminding Crown Prince Lu that it is best to think carefully before you make a decision, in case there is another accident." He and Lu Li both knew that today's matter would attract the attention and discussion of the geniuses of the 6 states. It was inevitable that something would go wrong. Lu Li was stunned. He smiled and said, "As long as young Master Ji is sincere in repentance, what accident can happen? Also, since I dared to invite young Master Ji to worship in the temple, I have thought it through." Sincere in repentance? Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and a playful smile appeared on his face. Others might not know, but he knew very well that he did not do anything wrong. Why should he go to the temple to repent? He had never done anything wrong, so how could he repent and turn over a new leaf? The reason why he agreed to go to the temple with Lu Li to worship the Immortal Master was that he had other intentions. Ever since the great changes in the world and the incident of the divine thunder, he had been harboring many doubts in his heart. He pondered for a long time, but he still couldn't figure it out. Why did the scene of Kenshin and martial god Taihao sparring appear in his soul when he entered the temple and saw the statue of divine Lord Taihao? Why did the great guardian tie him to the stone pillar and whip him? Why did the entire Mount of Gods shake and even thunder strike him? Was it because of the sort of burial of heaven, or because he looked like Kenshin? Or was it because of the Kenshin tomb in his body? He had always wanted to figure out the relationship between him and the Kenshin. He wanted to go to the temple again to see if there would be another great change in the world. Would the statue of divine Lord Taihao be worthy of his worship? With so many questions in mind, Ji Tianxing followed Lu Li out of the yard and into the front yard. Lu Li was at the front of the group, followed by Ji Tianxing, Jiang Ningxue and Chief Steward Fong. Behind them were the maids and guards. They walked out of the Hall of Tranquility in a formidable array and walked toward the temple under the Tower of Clear Heaven. The sun had just risen. The faint golden sunlight shone on the peak of the Mount of Gods, illuminating all the buildings. The sea of clouds around the peak was also suffused with a golden glow. It was an auspicious sight. For Lu Li, this was a good omen, which made him feel relaxed and happy. Soon they arrived at the plaza outside the temple. This spacious plaza was destroyed by the great changes in the world and the divine thunder, turning into a pile of ruins. Later, the powerful warriors and craftsmen of the Tower of Clear Heaven restored the plaza to its original state in just one day. At the moment, more than 100 young talents of the 6 states were gathered in the plaza. Seeing Lu Li and the others walking over, many of them looked up and sized up Lu Li, Ji Tianxing and the others with mixed feelings. Most people's gazes were focused on Ji Tianxing. They wanted to see what this guy looked like after all the troubles he had caused. The geniuses of the Outcloud Empire also stared at Ji Tianxing with disdain and anger. They whispered to each other. Lu Li ignored the onlookers. He led the group through the plaza and was about to enter the temple. The chief guardian and the 6 messengers had been waiting in the temple for a long time. As soon as he arrived, the ceremony could be held and the worship could begin. However, when the team was about to cross the plaza, more than a dozen young geniuses stood in front of the team, blocking their way. These young geniuses were all from the Outcloud Empire. Their leaders were Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long. Lu Li stopped at once. He frowned and asked in a deep voice, "What are you doing?" As the representative of the Outcloud Empire, Lan Yiqing stepped forward, cupped his fists to Lu Li and explained, "Prince Lu, we do not mean to offend you and we will not stop you from worshipping the Immortal Lord. However, there is a shameless traitor in the Outcloud Empire who has disgraced our nation. As citizens of the Outcloud Empire, we cannot sit by and do nothing. We must stop this traitor and make him give a reasonable explanation." Lan Yiqing's cold words spread throughout the square. The scene instantly quieted down and the atmosphere became somewhat heavy and tense. The young talents from the other states quickly retreated to the sides of the plaza, waiting to see a good show. They all knew that the traitor Lan Yiqing mentioned was Ji Tianxing. The geniuses of the Outcloud Empire were going to make things difficult for Ji Tianxing. Everyone was looking at Ji Tianxing with interest, waiting to see how he would explain and how he could resolve the situation. Lu Li was trying his best to win over Ji Tianxing to sow discord between Ji Tianxing and the Outcloud Empire. The news that the geniuses of other states learned was released by Lu Li on purpose. Now Lan Yiqing and the others showed up to stop Lu Li, which was within Lu Li's expectation. Lu Li thought to himself, the plan is going well. Everything is going according to my plan. Now that the Outcloud Empire is making things difficult in public, it is a good chance for me to win over Ji Tianxing. On this thought, Lu Li looked at Lan Yiqing coldly and sneered, "Ha! Lady Lan, you can eat whatever you want but you can't say whatever you want. People around me are my friends and citizens of the Thousand Snow Empire. How can I be a traitor?" Lan Yiqing didn't argue with him. She stared at Ji Tianxing coldly and shouted with contempt, "Ji Tianxing, you have the guts to betray the Outcloud Empire but you don't have the guts to admit it." Chapter 1529. Lan Yiqing's attitude was tough and her words were harsh. She was smart enough to not argue with Lu Li. That would be a waste of time. She directly called out Ji Tianxing. She would not offend Lu Li too much and at the same time she could put Ji Tianxing in a passive and awkward situation. As long as Ji Tianxing still had his dignity and character, he would not turn a deaf ear to it. He would step forward bravely. Young talents from different countries were looking at Lan Yiqing with new eyes. They had different opinions about her. This girl is so scheming. Ji Tianxing is going to be embarrassed. This Lan Yiqing is calm and wise. Her means are sharp. She has pointed out the core of the problem. No wonder after Ji Tianxing was punished she has become the role model of the Chuyin Empire. We cannot underestimate this girl. We must be careful of her in the future. Lan Yiqing couldn't help but sneer when she saw that people were whispering and pointing at Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing, do you think you can turn over a new leaf just because you have Lu Li as your backer? Don't even think about it. I will not let you go to the temple to repent and turn over a new leaf. If you take this chance to please the chief guardian and avoid punishment, you will become my stumbling block in the future. Beside her, Kuang Long and the more than a dozen young talents sneered as well. They looked at Ji Tianxing with contempt. For a moment, Ji Tianxing became the focus of attention. He was pushed to the teeth of the storm. But he had expected that Lan Yiqing and the others would stir up trouble, so he was prepared. He walked out of the crowd calmly and stood in front of Lan Yiqing with a sneer of disdain. "I don't belong to any force. How can I betray you? You should keep the word, traitor, to yourself." Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long's expressions changed. They frowned and the contempt on their faces grew. "What a shameless guy." Lan Yiqing scolded coldly, "Ji Tianxing, don't forget that you are the #1 genius of the Chuyin Empire. Now you've sided with the crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire. If this isn't betrayal, then what is?" Ji Tianxing also frowned and said contemptuously, "Lan Yiqing, are you deaf or are you out of your mind? I've already made myself clear. Do you still not understand? Although I came to the vast heaven pagoda with the identity of the Outcloud Empire's #1 genius, I'm not a member of the Outcloud Empire. Who I want to be with is my personal matter. What does it have to do with you?" Yi Qingtang thought. "Who the hell are you? Are you qualified to tell me what to do?" The cold and majestic voice spread throughout the entire square. The geniuses from various countries were all shocked as they looked at Ji Tianxing in disbelief. No one would have thought that he would say such arrogant words and even scold Lan Yiqing so badly. Lan Yiqing was so angry that she glared at him. She pointed at him and said "you" 3 times but could not find a word to refute. Kuang Long and the other young geniuses were also furious. They looked at Ji Tianxing as if they were going to spit fire. However, like Lan Yiqing, they had seen Ji Tianxing participate in the ranking battle with their own eyes. At that time, Ji Tianxing's style of dress was completely different from the people of the Chuyin Empire. Even his speech and accent were very awkward. Everyone knew that Ji Tianxing was indeed not a member of the Chuyin Empire. However, Lan Yiqing was furious. She had not achieved her goal, So how could she back down? She pointed at Ji Tianxing and shouted coldly, Ji Tianxing, if it weren't for the special care of Saint Emperor Tuyun, how could you become the #1 genius of the Tuyun Empire? Now that you want to join the Xianxia Empire, how could you say such heartless words? Saint Emperor Tuyun will not let you go. Kuang Long and the other young geniuses nodded in agreement while cursing furiously. Ji Tianxing stared at Lan Yiqing coldly and scolded contemptuously, I became the #1 genius of the Tuyun Empire because of my strength. I used my real strength to defeat all of you trash, not because of anyone's special care. As for whether the great Emperor Tuyun will let me go, what does that have to do with you? Who do you think you are to represent the great Emperor Tuyun? I'm warning you one last time, don't tell me what to do. Take your claws away or I don't mind crippling them. Such arrogant words made Lan Yiqing, Kuang Long and the other geniuses turn pale and tremble. He dared to say such arrogant words in front of the geniuses of the 6 countries. He was too arrogant. However, his aura was majestic and his entire body emitted an incomparably domineering aura. Every word he spoke was like muffled thunder that fiercely shook the hearts of everyone present. Lan Yiqing was shocked and angry. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. His face was livid. Ji Tianxing, you will definitely pay for what you've said today. She glared at Ji Tianxing with a face full of hatred. After leaving behind some harsh words, she turned around and left. She wanted to use today's opportunity to humiliate Ji Tianxing in public and stop him from going to the temple. She didn't expect things to turn out this way. Not only did her plan fail, but she was also scolded by Ji Tianxing in public. She was humiliated. The more she thought about it, the more ashamed she became. She was so angry that she spat out a mouthful of blood. Kuang Long and the other young geniuses quickly surrounded her and retreated to the edge of the square to comfort her. However, there was still one person standing in front of Lu Li and Ji Tianxing. He was in a white robe. Even though he was a man, he was as beautiful as a woman. His temperament was feminine and charming. Without a doubt, he was Yin Wu Quebec. Although he was also in the crowd just now, he didn't say anything from the beginning to the end, nor did he slander Ji Tianxing. At the moment he was looking at Ji Tianxing with mixed feelings. He secretly sent a message, Young Master Ji, I didn't expect that things would turn out this way. No matter what, I must remind you that Lu Li is a cunning and scheming man. He will do anything to achieve his goals. Even if you are in trouble, you should not follow him. He is not a wise leader. Ji Tianxing also looked at him with a deep gaze, sending him a message, Thank you for your concern and reminder. I have my reasons and plans for doing this. Also, I don't belong to any force and I will not submit to anyone. Even if the Holy Emperor of Thousand Snow was here, he could not make me submit to him, let alone Lu Li. Hearing Lu Li's words, the worry in Yin Wu Kei's eyes disappeared. He nodded slightly to Ji Tianxing and transmitted his voice to him, I didn't misjudge you. You are still arrogant and proud as always. However, I was born in the Tuyun Empire. My family and friends are all in the Tuyun Empire. Therefore I am unable to stand up and support you. Please forgive me. Chapter 1530. Yin Wu Kei's eyes were clear as he stared at him. His lips curled into a smile. He and Ji Tianxing looked at each other for a while before Yin Wuk turned around and went back to the crowd. The disturbance caused by Lan Yiqing and the others was resolved by Ji Tianxing. His confidence and dominance left a deep impression on the talents from different countries. Once again, Yin Wuk had become the focus of discussion. Lu Li looked at Ji Tianxing and then at Lan Yiqing and the others at the edge of the plaza. A glint of disappointment and disdain rose in his eyes. He had thought that Lan Yiqing and the others could embarrass Ji Tianxing and put him in a humiliating position. By then Lu Li would step in to solve the dispute and help Ji Tianxing out of the crisis. Lu Li was sure that he would be appreciated by Ji Tianxing. Little did he expect that Ji Tianxing could solve the problem with only a few words. He even made Lan Yiqing spit out blood and almost went on a rampage. Lu Li's plan had failed. He couldn't help but curse, I am so disappointed in the Tuyun Empire. Of course, Lu Li had to act as if nothing had happened. He led the others through the plaza and into the temple. At the gate of the temple, the more than 40 maids and escorts stayed outside and knelt in the corridor with respect. As servants, It was already a great honor for them to be able to come to the temple. They were not qualified to enter the hall. Only Ji Tianxing, Jiang Ningxue and several talents from the Empire of Thousand Snow followed Lu Li into the hall. In the splendid hall, Chief Guardian stood in front of the statue of the Immortal. The 6 messengers stood on both sides of the statue. Just like the previous ones, this worship ceremony was hosted by Chief Guardian. He held a book of laws in his hands and stood in front of the statue solemnly. He looked at Lu Li and the others with dignity. Lu Li led Ji Tianxing and the others to the center of the hall and bowed to the Chief Guardian and the messengers. "Greetings, Chief Guardian and messengers." Ji Tianxing didn't react. He didn't bow or say anything. He looked at the wall behind the Divine Master's statue, observing the murals and symbols. Meanwhile, he could not help but recall some scenes related to martial god Taihao deep in his mind. Those were Kenshin's memories, but they were scattered and fragmented. Fortunately, he didn't lose focus. His eyes were still clear and calm. Seeing that he did not bow, the great guardian was a little displeased and his eyes turned cold. However, he suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and ignored Ji Tianxing. In his mind, Ji Tianxing's disrespect towards him was nothing, but disrespect towards Divine Lord Taihao was a heinous crime. He held the codex in his hands and announced in a solemn tone, "I declare that the worship ceremony will now begin." Then with a solemn tone he began to recite the profound and obscure divine scriptures. His right hand slowly waved as he performed a mysterious seal. Everything is born without a beginning, there is a beginning and there is an end. Nothing is wrong, nothing is thought. As the solemn voice of the Chief Guardian echoed in the hall, Lu Li dropped to his knees with respect and kowtowed to the statue. His expression and posture were full of reverence and devotion. After 3 kowtows he stood up, took 3 steps forward and kowtowed 3 more times. Then he walked toward the Divine Master's statue step by step, kneeling every 3 steps and kowtowing every 9 steps. It was truly 3 kneels and 9 kowtows. Jiang Ningxue and the other geniuses of the Empire of Thousand Snow did the same. They knelt and kowtowed to the Divine Master's statue with utmost devotion. Only Ji Tianxing remained standing in the middle of the hall. He neither knelt nor kowtowed. His dignity and pride made it impossible for him to kowtow to the Divine Master's statue like Lu Li and the others. He only bowed to the Divine Master's statue. This was the greatest sincerity he could show. The Chief Guardian was still reciting the divine scriptures when he saw Ji Tianxing standing out from the crowd. Lu Li, Jiang Ningxue and the others were all on their knees, but he was the only one standing upright. He was too conspicuous. The Chief Protector immediately stopped chanting when he saw this. He furrowed his brows as anger surged through his eyes. He never expected that after what happened last time, Ji Tianxing would not learn his lesson. He even dared to offend the Divine Master's dignity. He gave Ji Tianxing a chance to turn over a new leaf for Lu Li's sake. He never expected that Ji Tianxing would still have such an attitude. How could he not be angry? "I have shown you mercy and given you a chance to come to the temple to worship and repent. How dare you not kneel?" The Chief Guardian glared at Ji Tianxing and scolded him coldly. The messengers, Lu Li and the others were all startled. They all turned to Ji Tianxing. Everyone stared at him with shocked and puzzled expressions. Nobody could understand why this guy refused to repent. The statue enshrined in the temple was the supreme martial god Taihao. Was this guy stupid? Why wouldn't he kneel and worship the Divine Master's statue? If someone's attitude was pious, they might be able to gain the Divine Master's favor and receive the Divine Master's enlightenment and rewards. At this moment, a sudden cry of surprise broke the silence of the temple. Heavens! Everyone look! The Divine Master's statue is showing an oracle. Hearing this, everyone was taken aback. Their eyes were dazed and they could not react in time. A moment later, everyone came to their senses and turned to look at the Divine Master's statue. The majestic and dignified Divine Master's statue lit up with a dazzling golden light. It was incomparably sacred. On the pedestal at the foot of the statue was a white jade slab, 2 meters wide and 10 meters long. It also lit up with a white light. This jade slab was part of the pedestal and was used for decoration and embellishment. At the same time, This jade slab was a piece of divine jade that could communicate with the Divine Master. It had a special function, which was to show the Divine Master's oracle. When a peerless expert or genius worshipped the Divine Master's statue, if they could gain the Divine Master's favor, the jade slab would light up and show different oracles. Some oracles were to enlighten believers. Some oracles were to give orders. For nearly 1,000 years, only a few people received oracles when they worshipped the Divine Master's statue. Those few people were the saint emperors of several large empires and the great protector of the past. Back then, the great protector was also a peerless genius of his generation. With his abyss body, his name shook the world. When he worshipped the Divine Master's statue, he gained the Divine Master's favor and triggered an oracle. Later, he was nurtured into a warrior saint expert and was highly regarded by the Divine Master. He was appointed as the great protector of the Clear Heaven Pagoda. Now the oracle had come again. The great protector, the 6 messengers, Lu Li, Jiang Ningxue, and the others all showed excited expressions. Lu Li, in particular, was so excited that his face was flushed. He hurriedly kowtowed 9 times to the Divine Master's statue and laughed excitedly. Chapter 1531. Everyone understood that a person that could trigger an oracle must have received the Master of God's favor and attention. Such a person would either be a powerful warrior like the 6 holy emperors or a peerless genius that could become a powerful warrior of the holy emperor level in the future. Today was the day that Lu Li paid homage to the Master of God. Not only was Lu Li devoted to the Master of God, but he was also a gifted warrior. Almost everyone was convinced that the oracle was given to Lu Li by the Master of God. The several messengers were looking at Lu Li with gratification and applauding him. This is great. Lu Li's devotion has moved the Master of God. For decades, we have seen with our own eyes that Lu Li would come back to pay homage to the Master of God every 2 years to thank the Master of God for his cultivation. He deserves it. When Lu Li was still an apprentice, we all thought highly of him and believed that he would achieve great things in the future. Seems that we are right. Right. The Master of God has given us an oracle. This is his acknowledgement of Lu Li. Chief Guardian was so happy that he even forgot about Ji Tianxing's disrespect to the Master of God. Looking at Lu Li with glowing eyes, Chief Guardian exclaimed, "Lu Li, I have always seen your talent and your devotion to the Master of God, and I approve of it. Now you have finally won the Master of God's favor and the oracle is here. You have achieved something. I am happy for you and I am proud of you." Lu Li had become the center of attention. Being praised by the Chief Guardian and several messengers, he was so excited that his heart was pounding. He had been waiting for this day for hundreds of years. In order to win the Master of God's favor, he had done everything he could. Now his wish had finally come true. He was so happy and excited that he almost jumped to his feet. That being said, he tried his best to suppress his excitement. He remained humble and courteous. He bowed to the Chief Guardian and the messengers and expressed his gratitude in a dignified manner. Jiang Ningxue and the other geniuses of the Empire of Thousand Snow were looking at Lu Li with admiration. For them, this was a dream that was out of their reach. They were excited and proud that Lu Li had been acknowledged by the Master of God. However, right when everyone was filled with excitement and revelry, a voice that was filled with bewilderment resounded once more in the hall. "Why is the Divine Master's oracle a little strange?" The hall instantly quieted down. Everyone stopped smiling and turned to look at Lin Daoist. He was the first one to notice the arrival of the oracle. Now it was him again. After carefully examining the oracle, he asked this question. Everyone looked at the jade slab at the base of the statue. On the white jade slab, there were 2 lines of golden words. "When I first entered the conferred God's land, I was struck by lightning from the 9 heavens. When the day comes, I'll break the secrets of heaven with a single sword." The years passed without a trace. The affairs of the world reincarnated into another epoch. Even now, I still think of the 9 heavens beyond, destroying the Milky Way and breaking spacetime with my palm. Previously, when everyone saw the white light flickering on the jade board, they only knew that the Divine Lord's oracle had arrived. Because of this, they cheered and jumped for joy. No one carefully read the contents of the oracle. Now they stared at the 2 lines of words. After reading it 2 or 3 times, they all frowned in confusion. Not only did the chief guardian and the 6 emissaries find it strange, but even Jiang Ningxue and the several geniuses of the Empire of Thousand Snow were suspicious. They secretly observed Lu Li's expression. Lu Li stared at the 2 lines of golden words. The excitement and ecstasy in his heart disappeared without a trace. He was filled with confusion, disappointment, and unwillingness. He pressed his lips together and said nothing. Anyone could see that the first sentence of the oracle excluded Lu Li from the list. When he first entered the conferred God's land, he was struck by lightning from the 9 heavens. This clearly meant that the one favored by the Divine Lord had just entered the Mount of Conferred Gods and he had attracted lightning from the 9 heavens. When the day comes, I'll break the secrets of heaven with a single sword. This implied that the Divine Lord thought highly of this person. This person was talented and had unlimited potential. In the future he would become a powerful warrior who could break the secrets of heaven with a single sword. As for the second paragraph, no one could understand it. For example, the words time of ages, reincarnation after reincarnation, beyond the 9 heavens, destroy galaxies, and break time and space were even more confusing. The Divine Lord's oracle was strange. No one knew who it was referring to. The chief guardian, the 6 emissaries, Lu Li and the others were all silent. They frowned and discussed in confusion. Ji Tianxing was the only one in the hall. After a moment of thought, he put on a smile. He put his hands behind his back and stared at the statue of the Divine Lord with glowing eyes. He murmured to himself, "It seems that the changes in heaven and earth and the thunderbolts were not coincidences. Martial God Taihao has sensed my existence and he thinks that I am Kenshin. That is why he sent down this oracle. Time of ages left no trace. Reincarnation after reincarnation. Even now he still thinks about beyond the 9 heavens, destroying galaxies and breaking time and space. Martial God Taihao is talking about Kenshin, isn't he? Or perhaps he intentionally said these words in order to test if I'm the reincarnation of the Sword God." Thinking of this, he finally understood the reason for the disturbance. The smile on his face grew wider. The chief guardian and the 6 emissaries were discussing telepathically, trying to figure out the meaning of the oracle. Suddenly he glanced at Ji Tianxing. Seeing Ji Tianxing's smiling face, the chief guardian frowned and shouted, "Ji Tianxing, what are you laughing at? This is a sacred temple. How dare you be disrespectful to the Divine Lord?" The cold and angry shout interrupted everyone's thoughts. Everyone's gazes gathered on Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing did not restrain himself. Instead, the smile on his face grew wider. He said in a playful tone, "I am laughing at someone who thinks he is infallible and misinterprets the Divine Lord's oracle. Making such a joke is disrespectful to the Divine Lord, isn't it?" The chief guardian was rendered speechless. His old face turned red. But he maintained his dignified look and shouted, "The Divine Lord's oracle is of course unfathomable and contains heaven's secrets. It is normal that mortals like us cannot understand it. How can it be a joke?" Ji Tianxing stared at him and said with a smile, "Everyone is cheering and celebrating before they can see the oracle clearly. What is this if not a joke?" The chief guardian and the emissaries blushed at the sarcasm. They were embarrassed and ashamed. Lu Li, Jiang Ningxue and the others were so ashamed that they wished they could find a hole to hide in. Seeing that the chief guardian was speechless, Ji Tianxing continued, "Is the oracle really that hard to understand? I don't think so. Just entering the apotheosized land and being struck by lightning. Haha." He sneered and glanced at the chief guardian and the emissaries. Then he turned around and walked out of the hall. Everyone looked at his back and suddenly thought of something. Their expressions changed drastically. Lin Daoist exclaimed in disbelief, "I understand now. The oracle is talking about Ji Tianxing." Chapter 1532. Even if Lin Daoist did not remind, the majority of the people present also guessed the answer. That Divine Master's oracle was absolutely not bestowed to Lu Li. He was talking about precisely Ji Tianxing. After all, there was a sentence in the oracle, "First enter God's sealing mountain, be struck by divine lightning of the 9 heavens." Looking at the past 1,000 years, only Ji Tianxing alone could cause such a commotion. It was just that everyone subconsciously believed that Ji Tianxing had offended the Divine Master's majesty before. He was still a sinner right now. How could he possibly obtain the Divine Master's oracle? When the oracle descended, everyone's first reaction was Lu Li and would not consider Ji Tianxing at all. This was simply too preposterous. But the oracle still appeared clearly on the jade tablet. Who dared to question the Divine Master's oracle? The expressions of the chief protector and the few divine envoys all became very complicated. Before this, they did not take Ji Tianxing seriously and even somewhat loathed and hated him. In terms of strength, this guy could not rank in the top 5. In terms of talent, this guy was also very ordinary. Yet this guy was arrogant and conceited, triggering a huge change in heaven and earth, causing God's sealing mountain to tremble and nearly causing a catastrophe. If not for Jiu coming forward to protect him, the chief protector would have long expelled him from the vast heaven pagoda. But now this guy just bowed to the Divine Master's statue and obtained the Divine Master's favor, even showing the oracle. This was simply too inconceivable, too dreamy. The few divine envoys stared at the oracle and were still whispering to each other, discussing the meaning of the oracle. But the chief protector frowned, all sorts of thoughts currently flashing through his mind. No wonder His Highness Jiu would protect Ji Tianxing. It must be that His Highness saw through this boy's extraordinariness long ago and will obtain the Divine Master's favor. Previously, this seat was still planning to find a chance to expel him from God's sealing mountain in the future, to prevent him from wreaking havoc in the Holy Land again. But I didn't expect that he obtained the Divine Master's attention and favor. Looks like not only can this seat not expel him, but I also have to value and groom him even more. Sigh. Thinking up to here, the chief protector sighed heavily in his heart, only feeling very vexed. Ji Tianxing was arrogant and did not put him in his eyes at all. However, he had to follow the Divine Lord's orders and try his best to cultivate Ji Tianxing. How could he not feel aggrieved? Lu Li's face was clouded with anger and shame. He secretly clenched his fists and his eyes were filled with intense anger. Originally, today was his most glorious day. If it wasn't for Ji Tianxing, he would have been one of the lucky few who could obtain the oracle. His future achievements and status wouldn't be any worse than the 6 great holy emperors. But now all the glory belonged to Ji Tianxing. He had become a complete joke. Ji Tianxing, you damned beast, this sovereign will definitely kill you and tear you to pieces. The incomparable humiliation and anger made him determined that as long as he had the chance, he would make Ji Tianxing die without a burial place. At the same time, in the square outside the temple, the geniuses from various countries hadn't left yet. They were gathered under a huge stone tablet, discussing excitedly. Just now, the black stone tablet that was more than 1,000 feet tall lit up with a dazzling white light, revealing 2 lines of golden words. The sudden change caused everyone to be filled with shock. They only felt that it was inconceivable. Some of the more knowledgeable geniuses immediately understood the meaning of the golden words and cheered excitedly. Oh my God! An oracle has come. This is incredible. Lu Li went to the Divine Lord today and was favored by the Divine Lord. An oracle has come. The exclamations and shouts of several young geniuses spread across the square. Like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples, the geniuses from various countries immediately understood that the golden words on the huge stone tablet were the legendary oracle. Everyone swarmed over and surrounded the stone tablet. They raised their heads to look at the dazzling golden oracle and let out cries of surprise as they discussed among themselves. This is incredible. I am lucky enough to see the oracle with my own eyes. I have heard a long time ago that only the emperors of various countries and the great guardians could receive the oracle when they went to the Divine Lord. I can't believe that Lu Li got one as well. I read in a book that in the past 1,000 years, only 4 people had received the oracle when they went to the temple to worship. Lu Li was once an apprentice and a talented martial arts genius. Every couple of years he would come to the temple to worship. His pious worship must have moved the Divine Lord. That's why the Divine Lord cherished talents and gave him the oracle. Now Lu Li is going to be famous in all the 6 countries. He can be favored by the Divine Lord. In the future he will be as successful as the holy emperors of various countries. Everyone's faces were filled with excitement as well as intense envy and jealousy. Just as everyone was discussing animatedly, someone suddenly let out a cry of surprise. "Look, why is that guy coming out?" Many young geniuses turned to the gate of the temple. They saw a handsome man in a white robe walking out of the temple. Everyone was not unfamiliar with him and recognized him immediately. He was Ji Tianxing. Instantly, the gazes of the geniuses from various countries were gathered on him, revealing playful and mocking sneers. Strange, the worship ceremony is not over yet. Why did this kid come out in advance? The worship is not over and he dares to leave rashly. This is a great disrespect to the Divine Lord. Ji Tianxing is really unrepentant. Last time he caused such a big disturbance. Today he is disrespectful to the Divine Lord. I'm afraid he will be expelled from the vast heaven pagoda soon. Lu Li brought him to worship the Divine Lord. But when Lu Li got the oracle, he left in advance. How can the gap between people be so big? Lu Li is a dragon that soars in the 9 heavens and this kid is a worm in the mud. What is he? How can he be mentioned in the same breath as Lu Li? The geniuses from all over the world were discussing without restraint. They were all gloating and laughing without restraint. Among the crowd, Lan Yiqing, Kuanglong and the geniuses from the Rising Cloud Empire stared at Ji Tianxing, smiling happily as if their hatred had been vented. Ha ha ha. Ji Tianxing must be kicked out. Right. He is disrespectful to the Divine Lord. He has no right to enter the temple to worship. It is only natural that he is kicked out. It is funny that this guy wants to ride on Lu Li's coattails. Lu Li got the oracle and soared while he ran away with his tail between his legs. How ironic. Of all the people present, the ones from the Rising Cloud Empire were the happiest to see Ji Tianxing. As far as they were concerned, the more humiliated Ji Tianxing was, the more satisfied they would be. In the time for 10 breaths, Ji Tianxing walked across the plaza and arrived in front of the crowd. He glanced at the oracle on the stone tablet. He wanted to leave and go back to the vast heaven pagoda. However, the geniuses from various countries did not shy away from laughing and talking about him with contempt. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.